Good morning. My name is Vidal Saenz, and I'm your county extension agent in Hidalgo County. And this morning, I'm joining my colleague, Marco Ponce, who's a Cameron County extension agent, along with Ms. Annette Cantu, who will be assisting us in providing the Zoom presentation for you all. First of all, I'd like to describe the place where this recording took place, and that was at the Texas AgriScience LLC, which is owned by Mr. Jacob Picard and family. This Texas AgriScience is a 350-acre irrigated research farm located in Bedford, Texas. They offer a full range of agronomic and research services that include yield trials, drought tolerance trials, entomology trials, pathology trials, and plant population trials. In addition, Mr. Picard offers plant breeding services and crop consulting services to our local farmers. We're very grateful for Mr. Jacob Picard for allowing this filming at his place, and also to the sponsors who made this happen. Just a little reminder here, we're going to be showing segments of this recording. At the end of each segment, we're going to pause for 5 minutes and answer any questions that you all have. And also, you all have the option, if you don't want to ask questions, you can also type in some questions in the chat box, and we'll be reading it out to our professionals here so they can answer them for you. Our first presentation is going to come from industry professionals in the seed companies and also the chemical companies. With that, we'll get started.
I represent Bayer on Delta Pine, Hasgrow, and DeKalb hybrids, and today I want to talk to you about our sorghum hybrids for the Rio Grande Valley and the Coastal Bend. So we'll get started here. Our first variety here is 3607. I know many of you have been anxiously waiting for a good replacement for 3707. So we do have one that we're going to offer next year. It's a real promising new hybrid for us. 3607 is a medium early. We're pretty excited about it. Very similar to 3707. Looks like 3707 with good head exertion. It's a medium early, sugarcane aphid tolerant hybrid. 3707 has been known for its consistency year in, year out. So we do have a new hybrid that's going to replace it in 3607. Good head exertion, good dryland variety for the Coastal Bend and out east in the Rio Grande Valley on those dryland acres. Very good head exertion. Last year it was about 600 pounds better than 3707. So very excited about 3607. We anticipate having a great supply of that next year. Here's 3707 right beside it. Like I said, many of you know this hybrid already. Very uniform, early, and very good yield potential for that medium early variety, and can handle drought tolerant areas. Very good as far as drought tolerance, good emergence, and good head exertion. We'll probably have a little bit of 3707 next year as well. 3816 is a medium early variety as well. Does not have the sugarcane aphid tolerance, but does have good head smut resistance, good head exertion, and very high yielding hybrid for us. This hybrid can go dryland or irrigated, has proven itself in that aspect. Very good disease package as well. Again, 3816. This next hybrid is 4407. We're very excited about it. It's new. It's going to work well in the dryland areas as well as irrigation areas. 4407 is a short stature plant plant with very good charcoal rot tolerance. Plant health is very good. Actually, 4407 was our highest yielding hybrid in our trials last year. A good mid-season sugarcane aphid tolerant hybrid. It's looking very well so far this year. 4407. Our next hybrid here is 4560. 4560, one unique characteristic about it, that it has sorghum downy mildew resistance. I know it's not a big problem down here in the valley or the coastal bend, but as you go up north into that coastal areas up there north of my territory, which is Woodsboro North, there seems to be a little bit more sorghum downy mildew problems up there, and this hybrid does contain the disease package. Last year we introduced 4660. These hybrids both have sorghum downy mildew resistance, but 4560 did out yield the 4660, so it looks like we'll have a good supply of introducing this next year, and has really worked good in the dryland areas as well, irrigated land acres as well. As we continue on, we're getting to our mid-full seasons. 5353 has been one of our leading hybrids on irrigation as well as dryland. Has very good tolerance to charcoal rot, stands up year in, year out in those drouthy areas, good head exertion, very high yielding hybrid with a good disease package. Again, mid-full season. This hybrid has won a lot of yield contests in the past. It's done very well here in the Rio Grande Valley on irrigation. Now, a new hybrid that we're gonna have a good supply of next year. It's kin to the 5353, has some of the same parents in it. It's 5407, another sugarcane aphid tolerant hybrid, mid to full season, has done well on irrigated as well as dryland areas. I would highly recommend this on your better type soils. It's got very good potential for high yields. Thrash is good test weight. Again, sugarcane aphid tolerant hybrid. So I'm going to just wrap up my three main hybrids for this coming year that have sugarcane aphid tolerance. We've got a medium early with 3607. We've got a mid-season with 4407, and then we'll have a mid-full season with 5407. Those are going to be my three leading varieties for this area next year. Again, I want to thank y'all, and I want to thank y'all for your business, and hope y'all get to try some of these new sorghum hybrids next year. It's going to be very exciting. Thank you.
Well, good morning. My name's Scott Stanislav. I'm the technical agronomist for Bayer Crop Science, supporting the DeKalb, Asgrow, and Delta Pine brands across all of South Texas. Today we're here in the Rio Grande Valley, standing in front of our sorghum plot, and what I want to talk to you about today is our experimental sorghum products and kind of the testing program that we have going on here, basically to test and develop and deploy new sorghum products to the growers of South Texas. So, a couple years ago, back when we were still Monsanto before the Bayer acquisition, basically our sorghum brand, or DeKalb, we joined in with Remington Seed and formed Innovative Seed Solutions, which is a group that specifically breeds and tests sorghum across the U.S. And so basically what was done was we reinvested quite a bit of money into the sorghum business to bring about new products and test products in a different way. And so that started a couple years ago, and basically the SPE program, or the Sorghum Product Evaluator Program, which was kind of tailored after our new product evaluator program in cotton. Since we've implemented that over the past couple years, we've actually deployed 5 new commercial sorghum products out into the marketplace with added traits and added yield. And so really, with that reinvestment of money, basically what that's done is we've been able to look for those value-added traits, such as race 3 and 6 sorghum downy mildew resistance, as well as having molecular markers for sugarcane aphid tolerance. And so this year we've got 5 products that we're testing in these SPE plots. 4 of the 5 have value-added traits, being sugarcane aphid tolerance. And basically, we've got 2 products that are maybe potentially the first to the marketplace that will have both sugarcane aphid tolerance and sorghum downy mildew race 3 and 6 resistance. So that's this product here, will be the first one. This is just an experimental number, so don't get too caught up with it, but probably a medium type early maturing hybrid. Looks really nice, this ISR 287. And then the other one that's got both the SCA, or the sugarcane aphid tolerance, and the sorghum race 3 and 6 downy mildew resistance. The other one would be this ISR 297. And so those would be first to the marketplace with those both of those races of sorghum downy mildew resistance, as well as sugarcane aphid tolerance. So we're pretty excited about that. And you know, moving forward, I see sugarcane aphid tolerance as well as race 3 and 6 sorghum downy mildew resistance basically coming standard in a lot of these hybrids as we continue to advance new things into the marketplace. So there's been a lot of excitement around DeKalb sorghum over the past couple of years with all these new deploys and these new products we're looking at. And just wanted to say we definitely appreciate y'all's business when it comes to DeKalb sorghum, and look forward to more in the future. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about northern corn leaf blight and basically the disease tolerance that we have in our lineup as DeKalb. So over the past couple of years, there's been a fair amount of northern corn leaf blight that has popped up in the Rio Grande Valley and across the greater South Texas area that's been a problem for some growers. And we get a lot of phone calls about it and asking about it and whatnot, but you know, a lot of times it tends to be problems with our competition as opposed to us. And so for us at DeKalb, we're very blessed that a lot of our hybrids have very good inherent tolerance to northern corn leaf blight. Not that you won't ever have to put out a fungicide application on a DeKalb hybrid, but more times than not, that's kind of a last resort when it comes to DeKalb products because of that genetic tolerance that we have. So us at Bayer Crop Science, you know, we're looked at as being the biotech, the trait leaders and innovators in the row crop ag space. And so I just kind of want to update you a little bit on kind of where we're going in corn and what are the different traits that may be coming in the pipeline. So kind of the next thing that we can look forward to, it doesn't have a trade name yet. It's just called HT3 corn, which is herbicide tolerance 3 corn. And so what that's going to bring is obviously glyphosate tolerance, glufosinate tolerance, as well as full season dicamba tolerance in all of our corn hybrids. And that's probably coming here within the mid to late decade. After that, we've got HT4, which is basically what I just mentioned in HT3, and then adding in 2,4-D tolerance as well as FOPS tolerance. So then the next one that I want to talk about that's coming on down the pipeline would obviously be our next suite of traits for lepidopteran pests, so any of your worm pests. You know, right now we're running with bringing on new Tricepta products, which is basically our VT Double Pro with the Viptera trait added on top of that. And so after that, we're obviously looking at adding new traits on top of that platform, or actually developing completely brand new traits that are specifically for corn against lepidopteran pests.
Today I want to talk to you about our corn hybrids. We've got some key hybrids. We've got some new hybrids that we'll be introducing next year. And again, I want to appreciate y'all's business this year on corn. The first hybrid here we're going to talk about is 6599. It's a 115-day hybrid. It's got the Tricepta trait for that extra earworm control. What I mean by that, I mean, we look at these ears on the Triceptas and they're very clean. No worm damage whatsoever on the tip. We're pretty excited about Triceptas. We'll be offering this hybrid next year. I think it's going to be a great fit on dryland acres as well as irrigated acres. 6599 is going to have good bushel weight, good test weight, a good disease package as well. Pretty high on 6599. Our next hybrid here is 6629. It's a 116-day hybrid. 6629 has been a go-to hybrid here in the valley as far as irrigation and dryland. It does contain the Tricepta trait as well, and this is the ear of it, 6629. Very large kernels, very good disease package, good test weight. In fact, this hybrid is on Azteca's food corn list. It's been a go-to hybrid for us in the fall. So I would highly recommend 6629 in the fall. And the reason I do is because it has a good husk coverage, and the husk coverage protects it from rain getting into the grain. We need that tighter shuck. Bird damage is a problem, and that tighter shuck gives us some advantage as far as that goes too. Our next hybrid is 6744. It's a double pro. Pretty excited about this hybrid. It's going to be a new hybrid. I feel like it's going to be a great fit on dry land as well as irrigated. Very high yields. It's a promising variety. Looks like it might set a new yield plateau here for us. Looking at the data from the last 2 years from the breeders, looks very promising to be one of them high-end yielding hybrids for us here in the Rio Grande Valley on dry land or irrigation. Again, 6744 has a very good disease package as well. As far as northern corn leaf blight, rust, holds up very well. All right, this next hybrid is 6772, 117-day hybrid. 6772 is proven for this area. It's done exceptionally well on dryland acres. Out at Raymondville area, east of Raymondville, it's done well in irrigation. So one that responds yet to higher plant populations, has more of a fixed ear, and has a good disease package as well. 6772 was my #1 yielding hybrid last year in the dryland. Very consistent, very good bushel weight, very good test weight, grain qualities. Looks really good on 6772. All right, we're pretty excited about this new hybrid. To have the Tricepta trait, 6999, 119-day hybrid. I think it's going to do very well in irrigation as well as dryland. As you go up the coast, this hybrid is catching a lot of attention. It's a tall hybrid. It looks very well. It's going to have a good disease package. Again, has a Tricepta trait and very good disease package as well. Good test weight. We're pretty excited about this new hybrid. Not sure how much we'll have to sell this one next year, but I'm sure I'll have enough to spread around my whole area. The last hybrid I want to talk to you about is DKC 7027. 7027 is a favorite here in the Rio Grande Valley. It's a 120-day hybrid. It has the enhanced disease package, what we call disease shield. Very good disease package, very resistant to the northern corn leaf blight and rust. It kind of sets us apart from the competition with 7027. Year in, year out, you know, we hear a lot about, hey, how well it's holding up against northern leaf blight versus the X brand over here. So 7027 is very high yielding, very good bushel weight, quality is very good on 7027. It's a 120-day hybrid, as like I mentioned earlier. It's my #1 selling hybrid here in the Rio Grande Valley, and it keeps growing each year. We keep selling a little bit more and more every year. So 7027 is done well in irrigation. We have a little bit on dry land as well, and it looks promising there as well. So again, thank you for your business, and hope you get to try some of these new exciting hybrids this coming year. Thank you.
Ramon Alvarez here with LG Seeds and Golden Acres Genetics. Here we have 5 hybrids in this showcase, and first one is a 2840B. It's a medium early, 59 to 62 day mid bloom. It's a sugarcane aphid tolerant, a pretty tall product, good head exertion. It also is a very open head. It's a highly tolerant for the sugarcane aphid. At times it can caution you about some lodging concerns, but that's considering the height of it. But a good medium early product that's highly competitive. Next product we have here is the Golden Acres 3020B. This is a bronze. This is a medium hybrid, about 65 to 68 day mid bloom. It is a little more. It's not tolerant to the sugarcane aphid. However, it definitely works well in irrigated and dryland situations. The head exertion is kind of where we want it, at a good height. Even in dryland, it does exert where we need it to. It's got a pretty good plant health for the coastal environments. The product works its way up into the north, up to Kansas. A good medium product, the 3020B. Next product that we have here is a 3960B. This is another medium product. It's a bronze. This is a sugarcane aphid, probably one of our top sellers here throughout the state of Texas in my market. It's got good head exertion, a clean look that we normally like to see without too many erratic two-talls that we call them. But 3960B has a good open head that allows air penetration and good dry down. Once again, it's a good medium product that will help you throughout your farm, and a good companion product to the 3020B if you want to share products on the farm. So another little bit earlier maturity, 65 or about the same maturity, medium 3180B. This is a new product that we just commercialized this year. It was a experimental 2900, did well for us in its experimental stages. We a little bit tighter headed, but still good weathering. It's got a great aphid tolerant the spectrum to it. A good head exertion even in the dryland setting. 3180B, highly encouraged for this new product to come down the pipe. And so the last product that we have here is 4880R. This is a red product, highly a medium late. It is about 69 to 72 day mid bloom. We're replacing 3696 with this product. It's got quite some height to it in this plot here. It also a little bit tighter headed than its our other products, the 3696, but better weatherability and a good plant health. This is 4880R. Here I've got 5701. This is a 116-day double pro. We also offer it in a Roundup Ready for refuge or a conventional. 5701 can also be used dual purpose as a silage hybrid. It's got great grain quality, high bushel weight, 60 to 62 bushel weight. Works well in various soil types, carries itself throughout the state, from down along the Rio Grande up to the Red River and even into the Panhandle and beyond. 5701 is also a silage product that works itself well, cutting high tonnage. 5701 VT2. Here we have LG 66C32. We offer this product in a double pro and a smart stacks. It's 116 day. This product is a high test weight that at the moment we are testing with Azteca in Edinburgh for a food grade corn. We see encouraging products. It has a great plant health that has the leaves can be used or a little more upright for a stronger, higher management. 66C32 is a good product for the Rio Grande Valley up into the Winter Garden, into the upper coast and the rest of the Blacklands of Texas. LG 64C30. This is a 114-day Tricepta. It's a Viptera with a double pro. 64C30 will work well in dryland settings, even at a low population, down to 16,000 plants, still achieving great results. The grain quality is high with a 60 to 62 bushel weight corn. The 64C30 also offers the Viptera protection for clean corn, being a Tricepta. 64C30, LG 66C28. This is a 3110. This is a new product that just came out in 2020. LG 66C28 is one of the first proprietary products that LG has to offer into the market. We're seeing encouraging results thus far. It has a good grain quality of 60 to 62 bushel weight as well. It can also be used as a dual purpose for silage in its respective markets. We are learning more about 66C28 to better position it for your farm. 66C28. LG 68C59. This is a new Duracade 5222. This product can also go dual purpose for silage. It is, as I've been learning it through the year, through the growth, we've noticed it's a more slender cob with a 14, 16 around, but a long cob with a long husk cover. And the plant health on 68C59 has been strong. The leaf pattern's a little more erect, and it's shown good height throughout. The winter garden, it gets extremely tall up there, about 10 feet, so we're encouraged with it. 68C59, 5222. As you can see here, we have worm on this double pro, we have worm damage, and if you can notice on this Viptera, it is cleaner with no earworm damage.
Howdy, my name's Travis Kidd. I'm a representative for S&W Seed. Our partner brands, Sorghum Partners as well as Alfalfa Partners. I cover this area from the Rio Grande Valley all through this area on up north, north of I-10 and out north of I-20. Travel all the way to the Red River. Carry all this area. S&W Seed originally started as an alfalfa company, two gentlemen ranchers that were looking for salt tolerance in alfalfa. Now, once we started getting, they developed their own program, R&D program for alfalfa, and found salt tolerance. And today, those hybrids are going to fit extremely well for this environment. So we have a fall dormancy 8 as well as a 9 that's actually on the back side of this property here at Texas AgriScience. Those are well known for their salt tolerance. S&W Seed purchased Sorghum Partners. This is actually a great example. NK300. Historically, this is one of our oldest known hybrids in the nation. This was actually produced in 1958. It's an extremely high-performing hybrid. This is actually a northern and central Mexico grain sorghum hybrid, but in the north of the Rio Grande River, we use it as a forage hybrid and silage hybrid. You can tell right here I'm 6'5", but this product in areas is up to 6'5", but in the margins of the field we're approaching closer to 5 foot. So if we had higher fertility and high moisture contents, we'd be able to have a nice silage product. This is actually grown here in South Texas and the winter garden for silages. This is SP78M30. This is a high-performing hybrid, sugarcane aphid tolerant. This is one of the first hybrids we discovered that was tolerant to the sugarcane aphid. Due to its background, it's closer and stronger in aphid tolerance. We have that high tolerance due to that Texas 2783 background. Texas 2783 is the public line that all of the sorghum companies source that tolerance from. 78M30 is a nice irrigated hybrid for this area of the world. It can perform well on dry land. I'd like to see it east of 77, Highway 77, and performs along the Gulf Coast, up the coastal bend, and on over to the Bay City area. SP68M57. This hybrid is our most widely known hybrid. It's most well traveled. It performs extremely well dryland and irrigated from northern Mexico all the way up into Nebraska. This is just one of those hybrids that you would really want in your lineup if you're a seed representative. You know, and so I'm very lucky to have this hybrid in our lineup. It's showing some extremely good exertion right here. It performs extremely well dryland, and this one's going to yield the best. It fits extremely well from McCook, Texas, all the way east of Highway 77. There's not very many acres that this hybrid won't go on and perform very well for. SP7715, this is also a sugarcane aphid tolerant hybrid. One of the things that this one's really well known for is its exertion and height. We've known that taller hybrids tend to yield a little bit more because of, you know, these plants are essentially, you know, solar panels. So the more light that they can capture, the more yield that they can produce. Due to that height, you know, we're going to get more yield. We're also going to be able to put this under irrigated scenarios and management practices, but this can also be dryland. This is more of an eastern product, so I like to see this on the east side of Highway 77. Keep this on the east side. This travels well up the coastal bend, the El Campo area, on over through the southeast. It's known for its, this hybrid's known for its anthracnose disease tolerance and resistance. And so it's actually an extremely high performing hybrid all through that area. Most grain sorghum hybrids are South Texas or High Plains hybrids, and this one has more of a tropical background with that anthracnose disease tolerance, and so it's going to be able to withhold a little bit more moist mornings. 73B12, this hybrid is actually kind of the cousin to the 7715 in terms of, if we think about you know, where 7715 performs extremely well in more humid environments, this is going to be the opposite of that. So we're actually going to not perform in the highest of humid environments. We're going to go west into more of a dry land and more arid condition. This is a medium late. This hybrid is extremely well performing under those harsh conditions, very open head, and it's going to perform extremely well west of 77. That's just a really nice cut off that highway. We like to think of it as a little higher rainfall as you travel east of 77, and then west of that, we know that historically those rainfall numbers are going to start deteriorating south. This is going to perform extremely well in that Agua Dulce area and over into McCook and north. So while we're out here evaluating these sorghum hybrids, we have to pay attention close to one major detail. We have a lot of different maturities of sorghum hybrids out here in this area, and all of these are small plots. So one of the things you're going to realize is this is not the exact same thing as a commercial field where you have essentially one hybrid for hundreds of acres, and then your neighbor might have a different hybrid or similar genetics. We have probably 40 or 50 hybrids out here in close proximity to one another. With that being said, when it comes down to management decisions and what you're going to plant, make sure that we're looking at planting on time with a proper maturity hybrid. So if your neighbors are planting medium maturity hybrids, make sure that you're planting medium maturity hybrids within that same planting window. Once you're outside of that window and you're planting 2 to 3 weeks later, simply because of Mother Nature, it may be an opportunity for you to switch up hybrids to something that's more likely to flower at the same time as the other neighbors. This here is what happens when you have a later maturing hybrid next to some earlier maturing hybrids. So sorghum midge is able to come in and start putting pressure on these plants, and they're going to start expressing that. So that sorghum midge comes in, lays a maggot during flowering and post-flowering, and that maggot kind of eats his way out and aborts that seed. So we like to see that our grain is extremely full and we're not looking at midge damage. Also, if we're looking at midge damage and you start thinking about spraying pyrethroids to manage midge, the caveat to that, there's always a caveat. I always think about, managing our crop, there's always a trade-off. So yes, we may be able to control midge, but we're also going to control our beneficial insects that can control our sugarcane aphid populations. So just food for thought. All these hybrids are a part of what we sell here in the Rio Grande Valley, here in Willacy and Hidalgo County, and I appreciate your time.
I'm Dr. Zach Eater with Advanta Seeds, and I'm the U.S. Technology Development Manager. Today we're going to be talking about two really innovative technologies we're bringing to the grain sorghum market, as well as some really exciting products that we're introducing this coming year. So the first we want to talk about is our Aphix technology. Since the introduction of the sugarcane aphid, we have seen drastic changes in how we produce grain sorghum. An Advanta's solution to that is to bring industry-leading tolerant hybrids to the marketplace. Our Aphix lineup clearly designates which hybrids have the highest level of sugarcane aphid tolerance, and we feel are the industry leader in that category. Our category is led off with the AG1203, which is our nationwide leading seller. It is an absolute phenomenal product for the South Texas market and going up throughout most of the U.S. It is a 63-day to mid-bloom hybrid with bronze grain, great yield potential through drought and on moderate irrigation. It is a product that you can trust to produce in the toughest times, as well as produce a bumper crop when the environment provides. The Aphix lineup provides a very strong tolerance to the sugarcane aphid. Now, this is not a resistance, this is tolerance. So it's very important to realize that this natural occurring defense mechanism in these plants is going to slow down the infestation rate, largely prevent it, but there's still going to be some opportunities for the aphids to reproduce on it. But this is going to provide flexibility in your production cycle, give you a larger window to spray your insecticides if you need, and in not high populations, it'll allow you to get through the entire season without an insecticide application. So it's a very valuable tool that we're going to continue to expand within the Alta lineup. The next hybrid over here is a new experimental that we're introducing to this market, and that's XG9127. It is another aphid tolerant hybrid in our Aphix lineup. It is a 63-day red grain hybrid, extremely tough for tough dry land conditions, and it is going to be a top-end yielder in this dry land market. Really excited about it, and we look to broaden this early market, early hybrid market. Another hybrid we have here is ADV G2106. This is an exciting product we introduced a couple years ago. It is about a 62-day to mid-bloom hybrid. It's a little faster than many of the products on the market, but it regularly out-yields its maturity class. It's a very tough hybrid. It has very strong Australian genetics that we've brought in through our global germplasm program that brings a lot of drought tolerance and a lot of hardiness to stand through even our toughest seasons. So when you're looking for a dry land short season hybrid, 2106 is an excellent selection for you. It'll also yield in those tough environments against some of the fuller seasons. So again, it's a moderate sugarcane aphid tolerant hybrid at 62 days to mid-bloom, red grain. An exciting experimental that we have coming onto the market is the XG256. This was just advanced into our commercial lineup going into next year, so we're going to be really excited to see this one available next year. It is a 65-day to mid-bloom hybrid, exceptional yield potential. It's going to be a top 10% yield potential in this region. Outstanding yield, great standability, exceptional head size, and a moderate sugarcane aphid tolerance to it. So ADV G2275 has been a great addition to our lineup over the last couple of years for this region here from Corpus South. It is a 66-day to mid-bloom bronze hybrid that has exceptional exertion out of the flag leaf, even in tough dry land conditions. So it's one that you can trust is going to get that head out of that leaf and have very good harvestability. It has great stay green and moderate sugarcane aphid tolerance, making it an all-around package for growers in this region. This is a hybrid where we see our best agronomic performance in a population that we bump about 5 to 10% over the standards in this region. It does very well in terms of threshability. We have routinely had growers come back to this hybrid because of the way it harvests. It harvests exceptionally clean. It stands through just about any kind of conditions we've thrown it in this region, as well as having that great stay green, so its standability is phenomenal. So again, 2275 is an excellent medium hybrid for us at 66 days to mid-bloom. ADV G3189 is a medium late aphid tolerant hybrid for us. It is in our Aphix lineup. It's our full season offering for this region. 68 days to mid-bloom, bronze grain, just exceptional grain filling period. It will bloom out a little bit earlier than many of the other medium lates in this market, but its grain fill period is very long. Great exertion out of the flag leaf. It has just been a tremendous performer for us, not only here on our irrigated plot that we're looking at, but even on our dryland plots. This is a product that has just been introduced this year for the 2020 growing season. Very strong aphid tolerant. It travels exceptionally well from the border all the way up into the Kansas market, so it has a very broad adaptability and great yield potential. It's going to have a little bit tighter of a head than some of our other products in the lineup, but it does exceptionally well in terms of overall performance. So this is one we really need to be checking out in this market as we try to get those higher yield potential acres on grain sorghum. So another experimental we have is XG224. The 224, this is a 69-day full season hybrid with exceptional yield potential. This is a product that will be moving into our commercial lineup in the coming years. Moderate sugarcane aphid tolerance, but what really sets this apart is the elite yield potential that we have for this particular genetics right here. This will be a player in the South Texas market for those more productive ground, more productive acres that we have. Again, moderate sugarcane aphid tolerance, exceptional yield potential. Really exciting to add something of this caliber to our lineup and to see where it goes from here. So we've talked a lot about Aphix, we've talked a lot about some exciting products, but the biggest thing we want to talk about is our new iGrowth program, and if you come with me, we'll take a look. And next, I'm excited to be talking to you about our iGrowth herbicide tolerant sorghum. This is a program that has been in development for many years and finally coming to commercial launch here in the U.S. We've launched this product in Australia, Argentina, and many other grain sorghum growing regions of the world. This is going to allow farmers to have a pre or post application of a grass and broadleaf herbicide in season. Today, we're going to be talking about 5 of our hybrids that we're going to be moving into a commercial launch coming this year, as well as talking about the new developments and where you can find more information as we go through the summer. We're going to have many opportunities for webinars, field days, and hands-on learning before we get into our fall season and then into next year's planting season. So first, let's talk about some hybrids. The first hybrid we have here is 1142. This is a 62-day to mid-bloom hybrid. It's a red grain, excellent yield potential, strong on dry land. This is a product that we have been testing in this market for about 4 years now, so we have a strong understanding of its performance potential. This is going to be a hybrid that does really well even when you narrow up the rows. It is broadly adaptable throughout the Texas grain sorghum belt. So throughout the coastal bend, 1142 is going to be a a great hybrid for you, but it's also going to bring you a nice addition with the iGrowth technology, which is going to allow you to have that herbicide window later in the season. The next hybrid we have for you is a little bit longer season. 2177. This is a 64-day to mid-bloom red grain hybrid. Excellent potential, yield potential for its maturity class. It's going to be a broadly adapted hybrid throughout the Gulf Coast and South Texas region. Great yield potential, very strong yielding in dryland conditions, as well as some moderate sugarcane aphid tolerance. It's an excellent product for you to dip your toe into our new iGrowth technology and try it out on whether it's marginal ground or on your better ground. The next product that we have is our 2168. This is a little bit longer season than the previous two products we've looked at. It's right at 65, 66 days to mid-bloom. That maturity is going to give you a little bit more yield potential on these products. Great on dry land conditions, but really shines when you have better productive ground for it. Very strong standability, good head exertion, and a nice head size. This is a product that we're really excited to be bringing to the market because we feel it's going to bring not only the herbicide technology, but great yield potential for this market. 2193 is another medium maturity hybrid we are launching in our iGrowth lineup. This is going to be about 66 days to mid-bloom. It's broadly adaptable. And you've heard that a lot from the lineup. So a lot of these iGrowth hybrids are going to be broadly adaptable. They're going to have a big, wide fit. As we bring more products into the lineup, we're going to really dial in on certain geographic and regional environments. But the 2193, great yield potential. It's going to be a strong contender on more productive ground. It will yield through on dry land. We have trials here in the Lyford area on some tough dryland conditions, and it's proven to be a really tough hybrid for us. Overall, it's going to be our second generation and introduction of this technology. So this is going to be one that we have limited availability next year of, but all the other hybrids we're going to have a lot more availability of. But this is one that you're going to see in our trials next year as well as this year, but also see it in some public land grant trials with Texas A&M. This next hybrid we have is G1120. This is a earlier hybrid for us. It's about 60 to 61 days to mid-bloom in this environment. Very tall, big exertion out of the flag leaf here on this high production, limited irrigation ground. So it does get a little bit taller in this environment, but the grain head is semi-compact. It's red grain. It's very tough on dryland as well. We have it in our dryland plot here in the Lyford in coastal Bend regions. What's exciting about this one, just like our 2106 comes out of some of our Australian genetics, bringing a tremendous drought tolerant package. The 1120 also comes from some parent lines we've been working with out of our Australian breeding program that bring a tremendous drought tolerant product to our market, as well as bringing a very vibrant red color grain for those that are really looking for a product like that. This is one that's going to be broadly adapted from Tamaulipas, Mexico, all the way up the coast and into central Texas. This is going to be an exciting product for us going forward to be introducing the iGrowth technology. So what we have is 5 products here, and these are our first generation into the U.S. market. But what we need to keep our eye on is that each generation that comes after it is only going to get better and better. So we encourage you to go out this next year to try this seed out, get it on your farm so you feel comfortable with these products. We're going to have plenty of data to show yield potential as well as overall herbicide program performance going forward. But always know that this is the future for sorghum, to have a herbicide tolerant component to the hybrids. So we're going to have many more developments coming forward. And finally, I just want to encourage you, as we go through the summer, we're going to have many opportunities for you to get out in the field, see these products for yourself, and get your eyes on how the herbicide program works as well as the hybrids performance. And coming on July 8th, on July 8th, we're going to be having our online webinar field day, virtual field day, featuring all of the iGrowth components. We're going to be working with our parent company, UPL, who is our herbicide partner in all of this. They are the 5th largest agricultural company in the world, so they have a tremendous understanding of herbicides and this market, so they're going to provide a lot of expertise. So tune into this webinar, our Sorghum Frontiers webinar, in a partnership with High Plains Journal on July 8th, and we'll be showcasing all of the hybrids, all of the herbicide programs, as well as all the other products we've talked about today and how they compare to one another. And with that, I really appreciate your time. I know this is a trying change, having the virtual field days rather than coming out in person, but we're really excited to try something new here with Texas AgriScience and really get our message out there so you can participate even whenever you're not able to be in person. So with that, I'm Dr. Zach Eder with Advanta Seeds, and thank you for your time.
My name is Bill Rooney. I am a professor at Texas A&M University located in College Station, and my research and teaching assignments are related to plant breeding and genetics with a specific emphasis on sorghum. That includes sorghum as a crop, includes different uses ranging from grain sorghum like you see that we're standing in front of right here, through the forage sorghums, both grazing and hay types and silage types, all the way into alternative uses such as energy crops and biomass for conversion to ethanol or other types of products as well when the market for energy exists within the biomass world. So here on the AgriScience farm, we do some research work related primarily to our grain sorghum improvement efforts, and one of the things that I'd like to convey to the group who will be watching this is the role of the Texas A&M program within sorghum improvement and the delivery of improved hybrids to producers in Texas and throughout the United States and the world. We are a research institution, and so our primary focus is on the development of germplasm or new lines or new breeding materials that have unique traits or unique values that may be of value to commercial industry who are actually producing and deploying the hybrids that producers buy and grow. And so we do that for two reasons. One, because this is the kind of work that the companies often do not invest in because it's higher risk and less, not always going to develop something of marketable value. And secondly, we use the program as a platform to train graduate students in plant breeding and genetics so that the next generation of crop improvement specialists are around to work on sorghum or corn or whatever crop that they find gainful employment and interest in. And so the program is really a platform to do those two things, and through that platform and those graduate students, we actually end up doing the research on specialty traits or traits of importance to producers and end users and seed production specialists, as well as eventually producing and doing research on those traits so that we can improve the process of breeding and make it more efficient. Ultimately, what that does is produces material that has application in the real world. And so what you're looking at here and what we do as we evaluate material throughout the state at strategic locations is evaluate both the lines that produce hybrids and experimental hybrids that test the value of new breeding lines for their use either commercially or for research purposes. And so as you look at our program across the state, we have strategic locations laid out throughout the state where we do this evaluation. Where we're standing here in the Rio Grande Valley is the southernmost evaluation point in the state, and we evaluate both inbred lines and hybrids for their potential in these in this subtropical type of region. As we move north, we have locations in the Corpus Christi area, in central Texas, at our home base in College Station, and then up in the high plains in the Lubbock and the Amarillo and the Texas Panhandle area, all areas where sorghum is important. And so what we're looking for is, as we look at trials like these that you see here, are agronomic attributes of performance. Does it flower at the right time? Does it have the right height? Does it have the right grain yield? Does it have the right disease resistance packages? And what is the quality of, in this case, the grain that's produced as we walk through that process? We accumulate all that data, and then we use that to make decisions both in our research program as to how to do things more efficiently, and then we also use it to offer new material to companies saying, hey, this has a unique trait such as sugarcane aphid resistance or anthracnose resistance or improved grain quality in a form such as, say, waxy endosperm. Those lines are then made available to companies who can use them in their own programs to produce the hybrids that are commercially grown, or they can use them for breeding to improve new lines that carry those unique traits that producers can eventually see in their program. To further that, we have research studies out here to test the applications of those types of things, and the graduate students that conduct those research studies come and take measurements, collect samples for further analysis to look at improving the process of the breeding programs. And so much of the information that we extract from a location such as this will be used for that purpose. One of the things that producers are often aware of but not visually seeing in many situations is where these hybrids come from. We all know that you grow hybrids of corn, of sorghum, of several other types of crops, but oftentimes you don't see the backdrop behind that. For a hybrid, you have to have inbred lines, or lines that are the parent stock to produce those hybrids from. And the reason we grow hybrids in the first place is because of the concept of hybrid vigor or heterosis, that the hybrid will outperform both parents in a combination that is used to produce that hybrid. And to manifest that, you're looking at a couple hybrids, right? Hybrids in this area right here, the reds and the whites, and these reds as well here. To differentiate that from what you see with parental stock, you can come look at these materials to the left of that red hybrid there, and you'll notice that they're a little shorter. They're a little bit later, okay, in maturity. They're a little bit delayed relative to those hybrids. But these are inbred lines, and what you're seeing here in the difference between the performance of these two types of materials is that concept of heterosis or hybrid vigor. You get this increased kick when you make the cross between two inbred lines. We've known about this concept of heterosis for over 100 years, but to be honest with you, we still don't really understand what causes it. But we do know how to capture it, and when you grow a hybrid crop such as sorghum or corn, those are manifestations of the hybrid vigor. And so when seed companies are producing your hybrids that you grow, whether they be corn or sorghum, they're using inbred lines such as these to produce the seed on a seed parent that then is bagged and sold to the producer, who then grows the hybrid that you see to the left.
Hello, my name is Rick Hernandez. I'm the Bayer Chemical FSR for South Texas. It's definitely a great pleasure to be here today with you guys and be able to talk about Warrant. Warrant is our encapsulated acetochlor product. Application methods for Warrant are behind the planter, on cotton at 3 pints. We're really seeing some really great success down here in South Texas with it. It is an older product, it's been here for a while, but last year we introduced it and relaunched it again, trying to get growers to utilize the benefits of it, and mainly because of resistant glyphosate problems that we were having. And so because of this, we're able to control resistant weeds like palmer amaranth, ragweed, water hemp, and some of the smaller broadleaf seeds that are out there. Does a really good job. We're experiencing some really, really good comments from growers on applications. Of course, it can be used on cotton, corn, and on sorghum. We're getting different application methods on each one. On cotton, we like it directly behind the planter at 3 pints. On corn, we like it at spike with a quart of atrazine and a quart of Power Max. And on grain sorghum, we like 3 to 4 pints incorporated or over the top behind the seed and behind the planter. Once it's activated, really, really good residual. Very, very friendly profile. Because it's encapsulated, it's a slow release. This group 15 is a little different. It's not gonna give you that immediate shock or yellow the plant or speckle the plant. You're gonna get a very, very slow release and good control of 30 to 40 days on some of the problem weeds that we have here in the Rio Grande Valley. So a look at a block that doesn't have any warren on it. It's starting to get a lot of palmer coming through. There's a lot of grasses in here also, and also ragweed over there on the other side. So just one of the things that warren can do for you is definitely clean up this so these weeds don't rob your plants of your fertilizer, and then give you extra costs on other herbicides that you have to use to control these things. Most of these are resistant, so glyphosate is not going to touch them. A lot of people like to use glufosinate. A lot of people are frustrated with that because it burns it down and then it comes back. So get started early, keep them out, and warrants the herbicide that'll do the job. I'd like to talk a little bit about Savanto Prime. It's Bayer's Class 4D. And although they did group us with neonicotinoids in the class 4, we are a 4D or butanolide, not a neonicotinoid. So that is one of the reasons that Savanto is a little different. We did get a really, really good safety profile on pollinators and also beneficial insects. So you know when you spray your sorghum aphids that you're not going to knock down the beneficials that are out there working for you already. 4-ounce use rate. This rate was discovered by Gary Sorchelos and myself down here before Savanto was released. We did that because it had a 7-ounce application rate, and we knew that rate was probably going to be too much and the cost was going to be a little high. So we studied and tested long and hard to try to find that 4 ounces for South Texas, and fortunately we were able to get a 24C on it and introduce it at 4 ounces. That 4-ounce rate is going to get you approximately 21 to 28 days, depending on your thresholds and where you stand. If you have real high populations, we recommend 5 ounces. 5 ounces tends to last almost to the end of the season. But foremost, one of the things I'd like to comment on Savanto is that we also have our decab line of sorghum seed. These lines tend to be very, very tolerant to aphids, sugarcane aphids. So what we're doing there is we're trying to work with them, but unfortunately because this has such good tolerance, we're not having to spray a lot of our decab lines. So the majority of the Savanto I'm selling in the Rio Grande Valley and the Coastal Bend goes on competitor varieties. So I would recommend growers, you know, we're there for you. We want you to use us. We've got a long residual, but we're a little bit more expensive. But we can guarantee that if you go ahead and plant a variety that already has tolerance to it, hopefully you won't have to spray and use this product, but we're there for you if you need us. Just recently we had a second wave of sugarcane aphids come in. A lot of growers have already power maxed and are killing their fields or drying down their fields to go ahead and harvest. And we started noticing that influx of a second wave coming in. Trouble with that is it binds up in the header. Everything gets sticky, so it tends to cause more problems. So we have a 14-day pre-harvest interval on Savanto. It's on the 24C. We're also really good at that 4-ounce rate, so if he wants to go and spray that, he's able to get in and clean up his field and then go ahead and go to harvesting. Make sure you check your fields, very important right now. A lot of growers are missing this application, and then by the time they know it, they're covered in aphids, and then they're having a little bit of trouble harvesting. Just a quick example of sugarcane aphid on sorghum. This variety here does not have any tolerance to it. It was not sprayed. It's over here by a brush line. So basically like a microenvironment. And we can see those sugarcane aphids just develop quickly. There is a ton of beneficials on here that I can see, but they just cannot keep up with this. So this would be a good example of if you get behind the 8-ball, this is where you can go. A lot of glistening leaves, everything's really sticky. Sorghum's almost ready to be harvested, so you definitely don't want to get to this point. Savanto is really good if you use it at threshold levels, and this is way beyond threshold levels. And if you do get into this situation, you can shoot up to a higher rate of 5 ounces, and it'll do a really good job for about 21 days on this kind of infestation. So resistance management is definitely important. So this is, you're seeing the reason why. So definitely you don't want to keep applying the same product over and over and over, which I see happening a lot. You want to definitely flip over chemistries. What you're going to see on starting with resistance is you're going to start seeing less and less days. Savanto is just a unique chemistry. We don't see any of that, so we're getting those long residuals, although we are a little more expensive. On situations like this, I think we would definitely do better than the competition.
Hello, I'm Marco Ponce, County Extension Agent for Agriculture here in Cameron County. And we'd like to thank our seed reps, who are also our sponsors who did this past presentation. Decal, Golden Acres, Sorghum Partners, Alta Seeds, and Texas A&M Soil and Crop Sciences, and Bearer Seeds. We'd also like, if you have questions, please forward them to the chat box. In the interest of time, we'll go ahead and forward those questions to the industry reps and try to get those answered for you. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next topic, which is going to be grain sorghum and cotton tests. We have Dr. Holly Davis, who's an assistant professor and extension specialist for entomology over in Wessico. And we have Danielle Sekula, who is an extension agent for IPM with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service in Wessico as well. So thank you all again for joining the Texas AgriScience Field Day. And we're going to go ahead and start the next topic. Thank you.
Hello, this is Holly Davis. I am the Assistant Professor and Extension Specialist in Entomology with Texas AgriLife. I'm located at the Wessico Research and Extension Center. Today we're going to go through and talk about some of the insect or arthropod pests that we are currently seeing out there and touch on some of the research that we have going this season in row crops. This time of year, it is very important to keep an eye out for sorghum midge, especially in the later planted sorghum. These tiny flies have multiple generations each year. They overwinter or spend the off-season in the pupal stage in fallen spikelets of sorghum and in Johnson grass, their alternative host. An entire generation can be completed in just around 14 days under the warm conditions we have here. So with each generation, the numbers are just going to increase. And that's why later flowering sorghum is hit the hardest. There's just more flies around to infest those heads. Here you can see what are probably female midges, and they're likely depositing eggs into the developing sorghum seeds. Now the females are only attracted to the yellow anthers, and thus the window for this pest to be a concern is pretty short, only about 7 to 9 days, but it is critical because as she's flying around, she's depositing single eggs into each one of these seeds, then that larva will feed within the seed, completely destroying it. Each female can lay up to about 50 eggs, so in other words, for each female midge you see out there, you can be losing up to 50 berries. So, like I said, it's critical that you get out and sample for this pest in a timely manner, because if you miss those adults flying around, likely the only sign you're going to have that you have an infestation is the blasted heads that you will have at the end of the season. So if you look closely in this picture, you will see those translucent pupal cases hanging out of each bract. That's where the little midge has completed development, pupated in there, and then the adult has emerged to carry on a new generation. This is a figure taken from Managing Insect and Mite Pests of Texas Sorghum, a publication put together by Texas A&M. And it's showing the estimated latest sorghum flowering dates that are most likely to escape significant damage by sorghum midge. So in our area, sorghum flowering after May 10th is at highest risk and needs to be monitored very closely. If treatment is warranted, there are a number of products labeled to control this pest. They are relatively easy to control because they're right up there on the heads. It's easy to get those insecticides to them. However, please note that the chemicals like pyrethroids will also kill beneficials, which can help keep sugarcane aphid populations down. This picture was taken here in the valley a little while ago. So let's talk a little bit about sampling for this pest. These flies are fairly weak flyers, so the most likely areas that are going to have heavy populations or be hardest hit is along field margins, especially downwind from sorghum or Johnson grass that is already flowered, so the flies can just blow in. When you do sample, do it earlier in the morning, usually before 10 a.m. That's when the flies are most active. And you want to carefully observe the heads for activity, or you can actually grab heads and shake them into a white bucket and count the number of midge that you knock into it. You want to start along the field margins, like we said, where populations are likely to be highest. Sample about 10 to 20 heads. If you're getting an average of 1 or more adult midges per head, that's an indication that you need to go ahead and sample into the field or throughout the field more carefully. However, if populations are lower than that, you probably don't need to worry about that particular field.
My name is Danielle Sakula with the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. I'm the IPM agent, Integrated Pest Management Agent for the lower Rio Grande Valley. And today we're going to talk about different pests. In this particular slide, we're looking at a grain sorghum leaf that has several sugarcane aphids on it. Sugarcane aphids can reproduce exponentially. They can go from 5 one day to 3 to 4 days later, 500 on the undersides of a leaf. But in this picture, you can notice that the sugarcane aphids, they're the lime yellow looking bugs on the picture. And what they're doing is they're feeding on the undersides of the sorghum leaf, feeding on the plant's sugars. As they feed, they excrete sugars, which in turn gets the leaves real sticky. Sometimes the plant can get overwhelmed with sugarcane aphids that they travel up to the head where you have the seed and can cause that to get gummy and sticky. They can become a real problem at harvest time. On top of that, when there's a lot of stickiness present from the excreted sugars, sooty mold can grow, turning the leaves black, inhibiting the plant growth. And so just all kinds of problems that the sugarcane aphid feeding does. In this particular picture, on the lower half of the leaf, you'll see the tan mummies, and those are done by a parasitic wasp. That inserts its egg into the healthy sugarcane aphid, in which a larva will hatch, in turn turning the aphid, this particular one, tan. On the next slide, you'll see several sugarcane aphids in this one, a whole bunch of adults and nymphs feeding, as well as some blue-black aphids. Those have been parasitized as well by a parasitic wasp called, you'll notice in this picture, here he is, he's called Aphelinus. He's a parasitic wasp, and in this particular picture, it's a close-up of him inserting, basically he's on top of that sugarcane aphid. He's probably inserting an egg, and which in turn will hatch, and then the larva will feed its way out, thus killing the sugarcane aphid host. So that's why you'll see blue-black mummies out in the field, as well as the tan ones. Just beautiful to see that these last few years and this year as well, out in the field, as it's a natural way to control sugarcane aphids. In the next slide, we have the Skimmines larvae. They're the little white, fuzzy, mop-looking creatures, and you can tell the big one, you can really see that it's going at eating one of the sugarcane aphids, and there's another smaller one on the left side of the slide. And we get a lot of Skimminies larvae, Skimminies beetles feeding on sugarcane aphids as well. Here in this picture, we have an adult winged sugarcane aphid, or otherwise known as an alate. She is very heavily pregnant. You can see she's kind of fat there. And she just probably gave birth to those smaller aphids around her, sugarcane aphids around her. And generally this is what we'll see at the beginning of the season as the alates, winged sugarcane aphids, are flying into the sorghum fields, and then they'll start laying live baby sugarcane aphids or nymphs. In this next picture, you'll see a pseudolarva, which is the gray looking larva up on the top left-hand side. He is feeding on sugarcane aphids. That's one of our natural predators. On the bottom right-hand side, you'll see a syrphid larva, which kind of looks like a yellow-greenish booger, for lack of better words, and that syrphid larva is also a natural predator that is feeding on the sugarcane aphids as well. So we have an abundance of natural predators feeding on sugarcane aphids throughout the season, especially during the peak. Aside from this, lots of ladybug beetles, larvae as well, feeding to control sugarcane aphids. When it comes to sorghum varieties, it's always important to look at the amount of sugarcane aphid pressure you have on that particular variety. That's why here at Texas AgriScience, I have a 14 variety trial of different varieties of grain sorghum that we're looking at this year. Some from Pioneer, Golden Acres, DeKalb, Anzu Seed, BH Genetics, Sorghum Partners. Pretty neat trial. Of course, everything's replicated. We've been looking at sugarcane aphid numbers, as well as seeing what kind of predator populations we have present. And of course, at the end of the season, we will be taking yield and comparing that to sugarcane aphid numbers. As well as with our Ag County agents, we have one other grain sorghum variety trial in La Feria, and that one will be looking at yields and also looking at sugarcane aphid pressure as well. It's just very important to pick out a variety that has some sugarcane aphid resistance tolerance to avoid heavy populations build up. That way the predators can have time to build up and control sugarcane aphids naturally, and you'll have better yield.
Sorghum headworm is a term that can refer to both the corn earworm and the fall armyworm. These worms can cause serious losses very quickly if not detected early and controlled. They grow rapidly, and they're really just eating machines 24/7, and they feed up on the head directly on that developing grain, so they can do a lot of damage really quickly. Headworms can be a problem from about flowering to hard dough. After that, they're unable to feed on the kernels. They're too tough and they can't get their mandibles in them very well. But like I said, it's important to detect and make treatment decision when worms are less than about a 1/4 inch long. Texas A&M has developed a calculator to help make management decisions. Again, it's available in the Managing Insect and Mite Pests of Texas Sorghum publication. But just in very general terms, you can plan to lose about 5% yield per worm per head. So an average of 1 worm per head is going to translate into about a 5% yield loss, 2 worms, 10%, and so on. Sorghum headworm is easy to sample by shaking heads into plastic white buckets and counting the number of worms. Do this 10 places in several locations throughout the field to get an accurate estimate. But do keep in mind that pyrethroid resistance can be a problem with headworms, and therefore they are not recommended at all on worms that are larger than about a 1/4 inch. And as we discussed with midge, keep in mind that many of these products will kill beneficials and therefore flare aphids.
Now we're going to switch gears and talk about cotton aphids in cotton. In this slide, you'll notice that there are some adult cotton aphids and some nymphs, some little ones. Cotton aphids can range in color from dark green, light green, to even black. They'll be noticeable. Distinguishable characters are the cornicles on the back, and of course it will be on cotton. So in this picture you can see some cotton aphids on the back of a cotton leaf. Cotton aphids like to feed on the undersides of leaves. In this picture, the next slide, you'll see a heavy infestation on some cotton that is just beginning to put on pinhead squares. Cotton aphids will, like I said, feed on the undersides of leaves, stems, and the growing point. And when they become heavily infested like this, they can inhibit the growth of the cotton plant, causing small squares and small bolls to drop off, and even causing bolls to be smaller in development. They do this, the cotton aphids, by their piercing, sucking mouth parts, feeding on the plant's phloem and sugars from the plant. They are generally in South Texas a early to mid-season pest that is needed to be controlled from letting populations get out of hand. On the next slide, you'll see ladybug eggs on the back of a cotton leaf. Lots of natural predators are found in cotton to control cotton aphids and other cotton pests, but primarily the ones that control cotton aphids are ladybug beetles. And on this picture you see the eggs on a leaf. On the next picture slide we have a close-up of lady beetle eggs next to a bunch of dark green cotton aphids. On the next slide, once the egg hatches, you see a ladybug larva that will look something to a small little alligator on the left side of the slide. On the right side is the adult stage that we're all familiar with, lady beetles. And like I said, during the season, it is great to see an abundance of ladybugs and larvas feeding on cotton aphids, controlling those populations. Another natural control agent of cotton aphids is a fungus that is known to infect and kill the aphids. It's generally present in very humid conditions. So the valley, we see this every year where we'll have high populations of cotton aphids one week, and then the next week a dramatic sharp decline in cotton aphids. And generally what happens is this fungus is able to take place under our humid conditions down here in the lower Rio Grande Valley, and it helps to, along with the ladybugs, kill the cotton aphids and drastically reduce cotton aphid pressure, which is great for late season cotton because we'll have bolls open, and generally we won't have problems with cotton aphids because we do want to avoid having cotton aphids excrete sugars and make sticky cotton. So this is just another natural control agent for controlling cotton aphids in the lower Rio Grande Valley.
So far this season, the cotton flea hopper has not been a serious pest throughout most of the valley. However, we are starting to see populations build a little bit in some of the later planted cotton, so remains to be seen what's going to happen there. But most years, this is reported to be one of the most significant pests. They are true bugs, so they have piercing, sucking mouth parts that they use to feed on tender portions of the cotton plant. most importantly, those small squares. You can see the nymph here, which is a yellowish to lime green color. Now they lack wings, thus they are less mobile for the adults. The adult, which you can see here on the right, will readily flit or fly around in the cotton canopy when disturbed. So sampling for this pest can be a little bit of a challenge. This is a great picture here taken by Danielle that shows characteristic damage by cotton flea hoppers. Pinhead size and smaller squares are most susceptible, causing squares to die, turn brown, and leading to this blasted squares that dry up and fall from the plant. The first 3 weeks of squaring are the most sensitive to cotton flea hopper feeding, and as in all crops, water-stressed cotton will most likely experience more significant losses. It is important to get out and sample for flea hoppers, and you have 2 options for doing so.
So in this slide we have white flies in cotton. There are several white fly adults in this picture. You can notice their white wings and yellow bodies. Then we have a couple of immature white flies. To the left of the picture with several white flies on it, you'll see a tiny little oval-shaped creature with 2 little beady red eyes. That's an immature white fly, or nymph. To the right, you'll see a close-up of the white fly nymph. As you can see that their bodies are flat and oval in shape. And they will feed on the undersides of the cotton leaf, basically sucking the plant's sugars. And when the white flies do this, it's the same thing as aphid honeydew. The white flies will produce honeydew, and the leaves will start to turn glistening from all the excreted sugars, because they're feeding on the plant's sugars and excreting it as they do it. And in turn, sooty mold will then grow on that food source of whitefly honeydew. This creates a lot of problems for the growers, especially in late cotton when we start to get our coastal rains, and if we have open bowls and there's sooty mold present from high whitefly infestations, that sooty mold will get wet, and it will then stain the lint from the open cotton bowls, making the cotton turn grayish black. So it's very important to control white flies. Generally in the lower Rio Grande Valley, we have the heaviest pressure along the Rio Grande in irrigated cotton, but we do see whitefly pressure in Mid-Valley as well. And it's just very important to monitor for whiteflies and not let them get out of hand in populations in order to avoid sticky cotton and stained cotton lint. In the next slide, you'll see a minute pirate bug, and he literally has his proboscis stabbing a whitefly immature. Minute pirate bugs love to eat white flies, immatures in cotton. They're one of the natural predators, and in this slide you can see him feeding on that white fly immature.
There's been some debate on whether the two-spotted spider mite and carmine or red mite are indeed the same species, or exactly what their relationship is. However, they have similar biology and cause similar damage, and therefore we will address them as a single group. Spider mites thrive in hot, dry conditions and can become a problem in cotton at any time during the growing season. Mite populations are often exacerbated by application of broad-spectrum insecticides that target insects, but do little to control mites. Although they lack wings, they readily ride wind currents or equipment from one field to another. And because they're so small and infestations start on the underside of leaves, hot spots may not be detected until they become well established. Usually these infestations are going to be spotty and often on field margins or in areas that are very dusty where beneficials are not as common.
In this slide you'll see thrips in cotton on the underside of the leaves. in this picture, we have both an adult thrip on the left side of this picture, and on the right side, several thrip nymphs in cotton. Generally, we have flower thrips, onion thrips, western flower thrips, all kinds of thrips here in the valley. When they tend to get to heavy infestations, you'll see them feeding on the undersides of the leaves, causing the leaves to turn like a silverish color. They use their proboscis and their mouth parts to suck at the plant juices. Generally, seed treatments do work on thrips in cotton, but sometimes a spray is necessary when you get overwhelming populations of thrips migrating from a nearby onion field that's just been harvested, or a cabbage field, or something of that nature, which is very common here in the valley. Thrips are an early season pest where we'll see them on the cotyledon stage up to 4 true leaf cotton. Generally, their action threshold is based on how many leaves are present on the cotton plant. So, for instance, 1 true leaf, you find 1 thrip per that plant at that stage. That's warrants spray treatment. The same thing goes for 3 true leaves. If you find 3 thrips per that plant, that warrants spray treatment. Generally, when we get to 5 to 7 leaves, or when it starts squaring, treatment is rarely ever justified at that point. Generally, you want to control thrips early on, because it can stunt plant growth, reduce yield greatly, and sometimes growers down by the river will have to even replant if infestations are that high and just overwhelming, where it just takes over the whole plant. It will kill the seedling cotton. For any info or more questions on any pest you saw on the slides today, or any other pests you might be having problems with in row crops, you can contact Dr. Holly Davis and myself, Danielle Sakula, at the info on this slide. You can also follow her blog, Dr. Holly Davis's blog, and as well as seeing other past pestcasts at the link provided. We also provide our email addresses and our office numbers.
Thank you very much to Dr. Holly Davis and Danielle Sakula for those comments. If you all have any questions, they're both on the line. If you want to ask a question or two, we're going to unmute you. I guess for about 2 minutes, we'll be answering, should be answering any questions if you have any. Again, we'd like to thank Dr. Holly Davis and Danielle Sakula for the presentation. We're going to open it up to any questions for about 2 or 3 minutes. If you all have any questions, they're both on the line. So if you want to ask any questions, go ahead. You're going to be unmuted. So go ahead and ask questions.
Arlene, I think you got me.
Any questions from anybody? We didn't have any questions. We're going to move on to our next presenter, which is Dr. Josh McGinty. He's our agronomist. He's from the Department of Soil and Crop Sciences at Corpus Christi. And he's up next, Dr. Josh McGinty.
My name is Josh McGinty. I serve as an assistant professor and extension agronomist for South Texas. I'm based out of the Corpus Christi Research Center. I wanted to give you an update on cotton varieties as well as a couple of key weed management updates that pertain to the lower Rio Grande Valley. So first off, with the cotton variety testing programs, I want to direct you to this website. It's varietytesting.tamu.edu. And that's our central repository for all of the variety testing results across the state and across crops. So it's not just cotton. There's corn and grain sorghum and sunflowers and a variety of other crops shown there. But if you'll go to that website and click cotton, you'll find our archives of cotton variety trial results there. And the main document I want to direct you to is called the Replicated Agronomic Cotton Evaluation for Southeast and Central Regions of Texas. And so that's basically the eastern half of the state booklet that we put together. That's typically released in October or November, as soon as we get the Central Texas trials finished. Right now, that contains the 2019 data and goes back several years. This fall, as soon as the 2020 trials are wrapped up, I'll publish that and place it in that same location. So in that publication, we actually have two different extension cotton variety trial programs represented. The mainstay being the Replicated Agronomic Cotton Evaluation, or RACE trial program. And that's typically an on-farm large plot trial, multiple trials per region with about 10 varieties at each of those locations. We asked the companies to place the same varieties at every trial within a given region. So in the Valley last year, we had 2 trials. This year we have 4, 2 in Hidalgo, 1 in Camera, 1 in Willacy. And we'll take those same 10 varieties at all of those locations, sum up that data at the end of the year, and provide that to you in that race trial booklet. Along with those race trial results, we also have what we call the monster cotton trials. And so these are small plot trials. I conduct them at 3 locations along the coast, one of those being in the Valley. Basically what this allows us to do is look at a wider cross-section of the varieties out there, not only additional commercial varieties, but also some experimentals that might be a year or 2 out from commercialization. And so typically we're looking at somewhere between 30 and 50 varieties at a given location. This year I believe we're at 49 at the trial in the Valley. And so we can look at some of the same varieties that we see in the race trial program alongside a much larger group of varieties, commercial and experimental. And then we'll sum all that up at the end of the year and publish that around about October, November. I'll also release results as they become available upon request. So if you're looking for variety trial results from nearby and you don't see our booklet out there, get a hold of me or your county agent. I'd be happy to share with you what we have. Just a quick summary of what we found last year. Again, we had 2 locations last year, both in Hidalgo County, both irrigated, one near Lyford, the other a little further south in the county with Richard Droy. If you sum up those 2 trials, you can see here Phytogen 400 came in first at both of those locations. And behind it would be Stoneville's 4848, Delta Pine 1646, and Delta Pine 1845. Those top 4 would make my top grouping for these trials last year. Now this year we're going to have 4 locations, so we should have an even better summary. The more locations we have to look at, the better the quality of that data. And so I'm excited to see what the 2020 test can tell us. So here we have the summary of the 2019 Valley Monster Trial. These are big tests, like I said, so we're only looking at about the top 25 or so varieties. There's a lot that you're not seeing below this in the trial booklet, but I just pulled out the top page here to show you that Phytogen 400 that we saw come out in the top of the race trial locations last year, it places roughly in the upper third of the monster variety trial last year, which tells us there's a lot of other varieties that we might need to take a look at beyond just Phytogen 400. If you look above it and also right there near it, you see several other phytogens. You see a Delta Pine 2020, NextGen 4936, FiberMax 2398. There's also a Dynagrow experimental right there below Phytogen 400. So that's telling us that all the companies have some entries that can perform very well or on par with that top performing variety from the race trial program in these tests. And so that's what I like to do. Look at the race trial results first, and then I'll flip over to the monster trial and start looking at varieties that might be coming along here in the next year or two. So next up, I want to spend some time to talk about some of the key weed resistance cases that we're facing in the Rio Grande Valley. So this slide gives you a list of all of the cases we've documented thus far across the state. Those that I want to focus in on are shown in red. So that's 2 species, Palmer amaranth or pigweed, along with false ragweed. So with pigweed, we're dealing with atrazine resistance, glyphosate or Roundup resistance, as well as ALS herbicide resistance. False ragweed, we're looking at glyphosate and atrazine resistance primarily, along with what seems to be some paraquat or gramoxone tolerance with that species. If you're not familiar with pigweed or Palmer amaranth, this is what I'm talking about. You've probably seen these plants in many of the fields in the valley. When you see those white watermarks on the leaf like you see in the left-hand photo, that's a telltale sign you're dealing with a Palmer plant. There are some other pigweed or careless weed species out there, but typically this is the one that I find in the valley. And we'll touch on this more when we get to talking about ragweed, but when we spray these plants at the sizes shown in these photos, in these seedling stages, we can effectively control these species with a number of different herbicides. If we let them get too large, effective post-emerge control becomes very difficult, if not impossible. And so typically with large escapes, we're dealing with mechanical methods or perhaps even hand chopping or hand pulling in some cases. So treat them early, treat them often, and you won't have too much of an issue with either of these species. The other plant that I mentioned was false ragweed or Parthenium ragweed. It's a warm season annual, although in our climate, South Texas, it's around for about 10 months out of the year. And so it comes up a little earlier in the year than pigweed, and it stays around longer in the fall. Near as we can tell, that species has been tolerant to paraquat always. It's not necessarily a resistance issue. So gramoxone is one of my go-to burn down herbicides, but that's off the table if you've got ragweed. And just about anywhere in the valley, you'll have ragweed. And then most recently, we've seen development of resistant biotypes to atrazine and glyphosate becoming very, very common and almost the norm, even in the Corpus Christi area. I just can't count on using either of those herbicides to control this species anymore, and I would imagine the valley would be like that even more so. These are what the seedlings of ragweed will look like. Again, just like pigweed, if we treat them at this size, we have a number of options we can use. If we let them get big, like that plant I just showed you on the pickup tailgate, that's a much more difficult problem to deal with. And so these are my summary strategies for both of those species. And if you've got one, I'm sure you've got the other. I can't find too many fields that don't have both of these species in them. And so let's start with pre-plant burn down. First off, one of the easy options would be glyphosate plus either 2,4-D or dicamba. That could be used in grain or appropriately treated cotton. So if you have Enlist cotton, you could use something like Enlist 1 as a pre-plant burn down. If you have XtendFlex cotton, you could use Ingenia or XtendiMax. very effective and fairly economical. Work very well on your palmer pigweed. Very size dependent with false ragweed. Okay, if we catch them in that very small seedling stage, 2,4-D and dicamba can be very effective. Another option would be Liberty. We can use that as a burn down in corn or cotton. Again, size dependent, so we don't want to let those weeds get more than about 4 inches in height, or else Liberty is going to see some escapes. And then lastly would be glyphosate plus Sharpen. That would be most suited for use in grain crops. There's not much or really any of a rotational interval that you have to go through after you spray Sharpen in corn or grain sorghum. Sharpen is one of the most effective herbicides I've seen thus far on false ragweed, and it's very good on palmer amaranth as well. So fairly easy to use in grain crops. If you want to use it in cotton, it's a little more difficult. So it's a 42-day planting interval, plus you need to have a rain in between there, so I don't generally recommend it for use in cotton. For your pre-emerge herbicides, I think at any point if we're putting out a pre-emerge, we need to have a group 15 like Dual, Warrant, Outlook, or Zidua in the mixture. Okay, we can use Dual or Warrant in cotton. We can use those two plus Outlook and grain sorghum, and then in corn we have the option of Zidua. I would still recommend that you tank mix with atrazine in any case in these grain crops. In cotton, where available, in the tighter texture soils, I would like to tank mix with a Cotoran or a Caparol. On those sandy soils on the western side, you really have to watch that soil texture and watch the rates of those herbicides, because we don't want to ding up the crop. But those of you that have the heavier soils, the clays and whatnot, strongly recommend that you look at mixing one of those group 15s with Cotoran or Caparol. And then when the weeds flush during the year, during the season, we have the option of Liberty in cotton and Liberty Link corn. Very effective, very size dependent, like we already said. Same thing for the auxin herbicides in Enlist or XtendFlex cotton. Very effective at the right size, but very size dependent. And then lastly, in grain sorghum, we have a couple of very, very effective options. Husky or Starring NXT, either of those tank mixed with atrazine, are very effective on false ragweed and palmer amaranth. So with that, I'll wrap up. Here's my contact info, my phone number, my email. Email's the best way to get a hold of me. Anytime you need anything through the course of the season, feel free to reach out or get a hold of your county agent, and they can put you in touch with me too. But with that, I will wrap up. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'd like to see if there's any questions for Dr. Josh McGinty on this last presentation. Minutes to see if there's any questions from the audience. Dr. McGinty, if you're on, if you'd like to say a few words, feel free to.
Yeah, Marco, can you hear me? Well, folks, if you can hear me, if anything comes up, you think of something later in the program, please feel free to get a hold of me. You have my contact info there. I've got to run to the field and get some spraying done, unfortunately, but please shoot those emails to me and I'd be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all again. And we're going to go ahead and move on to the next presentation. It's going to be the 2020 corn seed population trial that was conducted over at the Texas AgriScience headquarters. And that was done by Vidal Sainz, Ag Agent in Hidalgo, myself here in Cameron, and Matthew Rodriguez over in Willacy County. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next presentation.
This segment of the Texas AgriScience Virtual Field Day. My name is Vidal Sainz, and I'm the Hidalgo County Extension Agent for Ag and Natural Resources. And today I'm here with my co-workers Marco Ponce, who's a Cameron County Extension Agent for Ag and Natural Resources, and Matthew Rodriguez, who is a Willacy County Extension Agent for Ag and Natural Resources. We're going to discuss the 2020 corn seed population trial.
This is Matthew Rodriguez. I'm the Willacy County Extension Agent, and I'll be going over the next couple of slides. The purpose of the seed population trial is to seek a plant population that works best under flood irrigation practices in the Rio Grande Valley, potential saving on seed costs, best possible yields on a producer's farm. So what that pretty much sums up is that by these varieties that we'll be looking at, we'll be able to determine which of those varieties will work best on your farm. Obstacles in the RGV corn production, some may be not being able to get water on my crop in a timely manner, corn going through drought stress because other farmers are irrigating at the same time, very hot days and prolonged drought that causes corn to stress early, and weed pressure. The corn varieties planted in this test are Pioneer 2089 VYHR, DKC 7027, and BH 872 IVT2P. These three varieties were replicated 4 times at 5 different seed populations.
Hello, my name is Marco Ponce, County Agent in Cameron County, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about the corn varieties in further detail and their trait packages. The first one is Pioneer P2089 VYHR. The trait package Leptra, it's marketed for control of black cutworm, corn earworm, fall armyworm, stalk borer, sugarcane borer, southwestern corn borer, true armyworm, western bean cutworm. The herbicide tolerance traits are Roundup Ready 2, glyphosate, and Liberty Link glufosinate. The next variety is DeKalb, DKC 7027 VT2P, and the trait package includes VT Double Pro, which is marketed for control of corn earworm, European corn borer, fall armyworm, stalk borer, sugarcane borer, southwestern corn borer. The herbicide tolerance traits are Roundup Ready 2, glyphosate. The next variety is a BH genetics variety, BH 8721 VT2P. The trait package includes VT2P Double Pro, which is marketed for control of corn earworm, European corn borer, fall armyworm, stalk borer, sugarcane borer, southwestern corn borer. The herbicide tolerance traits are Roundup Ready 2, glyphosate.
Some of the agronomic practices in this trial was the corn was planted on 30-inch rows on February 23rd, 2020. 2 irrigations were applied. One was a pre-water, and then again on April 6th, 2020. The fertilizer applied was 12.5 gallons of 1137O as a pre-plant, followed by 45 gallons of N32 as a side dress on March 23rd, 2020. The herbicides applied to it were pre-emergence only, dual herbicide at 1.66 pints per acre, and atrazine at 1.5 quarts per acre on February 25th, 2020. Again, the 3 varieties were replicated 4 times at 5 different seeding populations. At the 16,000 plant population, the plants were spaced apart about 13 inches apart. At a 22,000 plant population, the plants were spaced at 9.5 inches apart. At a 28,000
plant population, the plants were spaced 7.5 inches apart. At a 34,000 plant population, plants were spaced 6 inches apart. At a 40,000 plant population, the corn plants were spaced 5.5 inches apart. When we get the trial results, the trial should be harvested by mid-June 2020. The yield results for the different populations will be summarized at harvest. Agents will email results to stakeholders and crop producers. Results will be made available at the Texas AgriLife website in the websites in the Rio Grande Valley. Results will be distributed at future educational events. I would like to say that this trial was the idea that we got from a local farmer in Cameron County, and the trial was sponsored and paid for by the Corn and Grain Producers Association.
At this time, we'd like to invite Jacob Picard from Texas AgriScience to give a few words or key points on this corn seed population trial. His technology is working, we can get him on.
Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay, so I just have a couple points on this trial. We harvested it probably a week and a half ago, and I was running some of the data. But a couple things I want to point out first is this, we did pick those varieties for being long season varieties. All three of them are, I believe, 118 day plus. So we were looking for full season, full irrigated varieties, which we selected those three. The general point behind this was to find out what populations would be the best on our irrigated land. We saw anything above 28,000. We had 28,000, 33, and 40,000 plants per acre on 30-inch rows, and those were all statistically the same. They had no difference in those varieties. So if you plant a 35,000 population of corn and you get 28,000 after several environmental factors, typically your yield's not going to change. Your yield curve is going to be pretty level. We did see a drop once we got to the 22 and 16. Those were significantly different, and we did take a pretty decent yield hit on once we got to those varieties. All three varieties did have similar yield curves, so nothing changed. One variety didn't do better at 30,000 than it did at 40,000. They were all pretty level. So no variety did better at any specific population. The 30,000 and the 40,000 populations were pretty much identical. We did have a little bit less yield on the 28,000, but it was not statistically different, meaning that some plots did just as good as the 40,000, some plots maybe didn't do it. It started to trend down at that point. The last point really is just moisture test weight didn't really change across any population or variety. So with that, if y'all have any questions about how that test was run, let me know or ask Marco and Vidal once we get that report out, which I still need to get this to them so they can get that out. So any questions? Can everyone hear me still?
Yes, Mr. Picard, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, if there's no questions, we'll keep going, I believe, and I'll be looking in the chat. If y'all have any questions later on, I can answer. Otherwise, back to you, Marco.
Thank you, Jacob. Appreciate all the information. Next for the program, we're going to have Dr. Thomas Axke, who's a professor and extension plant pathologist from the Department of Plant Pathology in College Station. His topic is going to be managing foliar disease of corn in South Texas.
of the Rio Grande Valley.
Hello, I'm Tom Isaacede, Extension Plant Pathologist based in College Station, and I'm going to talk about a couple of foliar diseases of corn in South Texas and their management. First of all, I'll mention northern corn leaf blight and compare it with another somewhat related fungus, southern leaf blight. You'll see this disease, northern corn leaf blight, in the field. It's not really important, even though it's prevalent. It's very temperature driven. Temperatures between 65 degrees and 85 degrees is critical for disease development, especially before the R1 growth stage. And this particular disease, in contrast with southern corn leaf blight, which requires higher temperatures to operate, is never very important in South Texas. Sometimes there are susceptible hybrids and you might see a lot of disease. And so in that case, you might consider in the future to limit planting resistant hybrids or more tolerant hybrids. And one contrast is a photograph from a trial done in Wharton County in 2016. Side by side, you can see the difference in the susceptibility. The hybrid on the left is much more resistant than the hybrid on the right. Fungicides do work for controlling this disease, but so do the use of resistant hybrids. So I'm going to give my major focus to a southern rust of corn, which is a fungal disease. And this photograph here shows how extensive that disease can develop on susceptible hybrids under the right environmental conditions, which are high temperatures and periods of frequent moisture, also supported by furrow irrigation. Now, this disease is also affected by the susceptibility of hybrids, and this photograph here shows a somewhat resistant hybrid in contrast to an adjacent hybrid which had a high degree of susceptibility. Now, in this case, with this degree of susceptibility, if you see a lot of leaf damage like this occurring somewhat early in the development of the corn, between R1, R3 stages, there is a possibility of some yield loss. Not all hybrids are resistant to it, and so growers that plant susceptible hybrids may get a benefit from applying fungicide. So I'm going to talk about guidelines for scouting and making decisions to apply a fungicide for southern rust of corn. First of all, this disease, like other fungal diseases, start on the lower foliage where you have a more conducive microclimate, and it works its way up. The critical time for yield development or yield impact by this fungus disease is at tasseling and 2 to 3 weeks thereafter. And also, the position of the leaves affected that are critical for yield are the ear leaf and above there. So if you see a lot of disease and it's confined to foliage below the ear leaf, it's not likely going to impact yield. Also, late planted hybrids or hybrids that mature late are more at risk for southern rust. So first of all, for scouting, you want to check the field before tasseling. You want to check the lower leaves. And you should also know whether there is rust in other fields in the area. And the main thing is to separate this disease, southern rust, from common rust, which is a different species of rust and which is absolutely unimportant. So the photograph shows side by side what the southern rust and the common rust look like. The common rust tends to have elongated pustules that are very dark, brick red. The southern rust has somewhat circular, orangey pustules. And so when you're scouting through the corn, the trigger for making a decision to spray or not is finding a high enough incidence of disease and severity as well. And so this photograph shows approximately 3 to 5% of the leaf area covered with southern rust. And if 50% of the plants have this level of southern rust, then you would go to the next step to make a decision. And this is a guideline I prepared to help you make that decision. So if the corn is, for example, in the vegetative stage, and you see this level of rust, it's still too early to spray. You won't see a benefit. But of course, you'd be on notice that you would need to spray at a later stage. If you saw this at the tasseling stage, you might need to spray. You might get a benefit from that. However, if you sprayed at this point in time, you might need to make another fungicide application, and this could affect the economics of your operation. If you saw it at silking stage at this level of severity, then you would probably need to spray, and one spray would probably be enough. And the later during the season that you see this disease and have that trigger to spray, the more likely it is you'll see a benefit and only need to make one fungicide application. However, there's a point where it's pretty late in the season and you probably won't see a benefit from the fungicide. And this starts at about R4 stage, the dose stage. It becomes less likely during the R5 or dense stage. If you're at black layer, there's absolutely no benefit to spraying. You've already made your yield. What to spray? I prepared a bulletin that gives more details, but this slide shows the types of fungicides that are available, just some of them. And this listing here shows 3 different types of fungicides, and within those groups of fungicides, there are several fungicides available, and these are also used in combinations with fungicides in other groups. Your choice of a fungicide at this point is probably going to be based on economics and availability. Based on my tests done in South Texas, I've not really seen that one fungicide is better than another. The results might be different in other areas that are under much more severe disease pressure. For more information, you can look at these websites, and I'll have my bulletin posted. You can also contact me, email or telephone for further information.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Asaki, for that presentation. I believe there is a question on the chat box that Jacob Picard posted, and we'll go ahead and announce that question over the video and then see if Dr. Asaki can answer that if he's on right now.
The question regarding cotton aphids and the fungus that plummets their population. Has anyone ever looked at using that fungus in a similar manner that we do in AlphaGuard? Could we plummet the aphid populations by applying the fungus somehow?
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so actually, John Norman and I had a project on this many, many years ago for the Valley. And the thing is, with a lot of these biologicals, they're not necessarily very reliable and perform as expected. I think the problem with this fungal disease is that, at least under South Texas conditions, it probably hits too late to naturally to have an effect, and probably I'd be really anytime you have something that requires a living organism that requires something else to grow on, you have this additional possibility that it will fail or not work in time. So short answer is I don't think this is going to work in other climates that have consistently high periods of humidity. They have seen where you have cotton aphids building up and then they crash because of the fungal diseases. But in areas like the Valley where you don't necessarily have that sustained degree of humidity, that won't necessarily happen and would be reliable. AflaGuard and AF36 for biocontrol of aflatoxin on corn and cottonseed is a bit of an exception in that, yeah, it does work, consistently works, but that fungus is better adapted for hotter, drier climates, such as what we have. So that hopefully that answers my question, or that question sufficiently. I also would like to make some additional comments, updating since this talk was done some time ago. up in our area, we had problems or concerns about northern corn leaf blight, and I was able to do some ad hoc fungicide applications. And essentially, I found that it really didn't make a difference. The weather tends to shut it down. And I know early on in my career, when I was in the Valley, I saw this northern corn leaf blight and the concern that people had about it, and people were wanting to spray. And Dick Fredrickson, now retired plant pathologist, said, "Do nothing. The weather is going to shut it down." And to a great extent, that does happen with northern corn leaf blight. There are some exceptions. This year, Gary Oddbody at Corpus Christi saw someone's hybrid experiment with different planting dates. And apparently, they had planted a very susceptible hybrid, and he showed me pictures based on the planting date of some of that hybrid getting just hammered, just desiccated with northern corn leaf blight. So yeah, under South Texas conditions, it's possible. Ultimately, you'd want to look at hybrids that have resistance to it. The other thing too, I've seen more disease in fields that are corn after corn. So crop rotation is an additional important factor in managing this disease. Going back to fungicides for southern rust, I did mention in the presentation about in areas where you might have more disease pressure, that certain fungicides might work better than others. And I'm aware of some work that was done in Arkansas where they did find that the strobilurine fungicides did perform better than the triazole fungicides, but they also had levels of southern rust that were much higher than us. And again, the weather is a factor that tends to limit it. We tend to have these diseases building up at a time when the temperatures are building up too, and we get into drier periods, and that tends to naturally limit the problems. So I'll finally close off. Mention, if you want more information about the southern rust, there is now a publication on through the Aggie bookstore, Texas AgriLife bookstore. Google that, and I do have this pretty much the presentation presented in the bulletin. And any other questions, I'm happy to answer that.
Thank you, Dr. Isaac, for joining us and for answering those questions. And we're going to go ahead and move on to the next topic, which is on cotton leaf roll dwarf disease. And Dr. Alavi at the Wesco District Extension Center, he's a pathologist and a microbiologist, will be presenting the next topic. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. My name is Olufemi Alabi. I'm a plant pathologist with the Plant Pathology and Microbiology, Texas A&M AgriLife Research and Extension Center, West Laco, Texas. Today, I'll be talking to you about cotton leaf roll dwarf disease. This is an emerging disease in the United States. It was first observed in 2017 in Alabama and Florida, and since then, there have been confirmed cases all across the U.S. cotton belt, including Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, Georgia, Texas, Louisiana, Kansas, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and North Carolina. What makes this disease concerning is because it resembles the notorious cotton blue disease, a very devastating disease of cotton in South America. And it causes and cotton blue disease, as we know, causes severe growth impairment and yield losses in cotton fields. What also made it very alarming is because Once it was observed in Alabama in 2017 and monitoring for the disease began, it took no time for the disease to be detected all across the different counties in Alabama, from north to south, from east to west. The same story is playing out in Georgia, where within 1 year you could see a lot of widespread disease across the different counties of Georgia. In Texas, we picked up the first set of suspect samples in 2019, and we were able to confirm that indeed they were infected by the virus associated with this cotton leaf rot disease. However, we do not have data yet on the extent of the spread of the virus across Texas cotton-producing counties. The symptoms of cotton leaf rot disease are somewhat similar to that of cotton blue disease in that the plants, when they are infected by the virus, can show discoloration of the foliage, including reddening that might be interveinal or on the vein, droopiness of the leaves, and stunting when the plant is infected at a very early stage. With time, the plants will lose their leaves, they'll become defoliated, and they might even have an appearance as if they have dried up. However, with time, new shoots will emerge, but that has set the plant behind so much that all production is affected. On mature leaves, symptoms can consist of either reddening of the veins or yellowing of the veins. This droopiness of the leaves seems to be very consistent with the presence of the virus, and sometimes you see that the leaves looks kind of misshapen with kind of bumpiness that we call rugosity. This is very consistent with cotton leaf rot disease. However, these symptoms might depend on the cultivar type, the growth stage of the plant at the time of infection, the weather conditions, and cultural practices. For instance, cotton regrowth definitely contributes to disease epidemiology in the sense that if the cotton plant is infected in the prowl season, you may not show symptoms, but the regrowth will start showing severe symptoms. We do not know yet how many strains of the virus exist in the US, for instance, and whether any of these strains show different disease patterns. What we do know, however, is that indeed cotton leaf rot disease in the United States is consistently associated with the presence of a virus that has now been called cotton leaf rot virus. This is a single-stranded RNA virus that belongs to the genus Polarivirus, and members of this genus are typified by these circular-shaped virus particles as observed under the electron microscope, the transient electron microscope, and these particles contain a single RNA genome that codes for 5 distinct proteins of different functions. One thing also that is consistent with members of this polarivirus genus is that they are transmitted by aphids of different species. When the genetic material of the virus isolate from Alabama was sequenced and compared with the virus that is found in plants affected by cotton blue disease, you can see that the virus present in the United States segregated distinctly from both the atypical and typical strains of cotton leaf rot virus that is associated with cotton blue disease, which shows that this is a very distinct virus that is present in the United States, although somewhat, they share some genetic similarity. And so based on all this information, we have decided that indeed the disease present and affecting cotton fields in the United States is somewhat different from cotton blue disease, and so it should be called cotton leaf root dwarf disease to show that distinctness, and the causative virus is likely to be cotton leaf root dwarf virus based on sequence information emanating from the different states in the U.S. Like other polariviruses, this virus, CLRDV, is also transmitted by more than one aphid species. We do not know whether these aphid species differ in their efficiencies of transmission. However, what we do know is that the mode of transmission is both persistent and circulative, in the sense that when the aphid species inserts a stylet into an infected cotton plant, it ingests the virus along with other constituents of the cell, and the virus particle spend time circulating through the entire body of the insect before they find their way back into the salivary gland, and they get ingested when that aphid is feeding on another plant, this time around perhaps a plant that is virus free. And so far, based on work done in Auburn University, Alabama, we now know that at least 3 aphid species are capable of transmitting CLRDV in the United States. These are cotton aphid, the green peach aphid, and the cowpea aphid. And there might be more aphid vectors that are yet to be uncovered. So the question naturally is, if I spray for aphids, will that solve the disease problem? Well, the answer is yes and no. Studies done in Alabama have shown that weekly insecticide sprays did not reduce colonization by aphids. It's all about numbers in aphids, and it's all about timing of insecticide spray. We are not probably going to get rid of all the aphids within a particular field, and all it takes is one single aphid carrying the virus to spread the disease. And so they have shown that aphid management did not reduce final disease incidence, because again, the other thing too is it's all about timing. The time when you're spraying, by the time you spray, these aphids might have acquired and transmitted the virus. We know that the same 3 different confirmed vectors of CLRDV are also abundant in cotton fields in Texas, and so that should be concerning to us. And so there's still a lot of research going on to look at timing. When will be the best timing for sprays to control aphid and through that control virus spread? In terms of diagnosis, symptoms alone are unreliable for diagnosis of CLRDD as cotton leaf root dwarf disease or presence of cotton leaf root dwarf virus. And we know that because different cultivars may show different reactions to this virus. Some may show symptoms, some may not. And even within those that show symptoms, symptoms may vary by environment, by the age of plant at the first time of infection. We also know that symptoms may resemble physiological factors like herbicide injury, insect feeding damage, drought stress that might confound the diagnosis. And so the most reliable way to know if the virus is present in your cotton field is to take samples for serological diagnosis using ELISA or molecular tests using reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction. And the good news is, our lab here in West Lago and other Texas A&M labs are well equipped to test for this virus. And so, what lies in the future, and what can we do to combat this threat? Well, first and foremost, in Texas, we'd like to know how widespread cotton leaf root dwarf virus is in Texas. We'd also like to know whether the virus induces significant disease under growing conditions. And if yes, what is the production impact? Can we estimate the economic impact so that we can weigh that side by side with the cost of control? What are the aphid species that are primary vectors under Texas growing conditions? And different aphid species vary in their transmission efficiencies. How homogeneous is the virus population in Texas fields? Are they genetically diverse or are they genetically homogeneous? Are there alternative host plants for both the vector as well as the virus that we need to be tackling as an indirect way of controlling both? And more importantly, do we have existing varieties or sources of tolerance or resistance to both the virus as well as the aphid that can be exploited to develop durable resistance against this disease? With that, I'll thank you very much for your time, and if you have any questions or require my assistance, you can either reach me through my email or my phone number shown here on the screen. Thank you very much.
Is there any questions for Dr. Alabi from anybody in the audience or in the chat box? If there's no questions, we're going to move on to our next presentation, which is by Dr. Don Renchi, who is the Extension Program Leader and Coordinator and Associate Professor at Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service in College Station. He's going to talk about federal and PDA record keeping.
Good afternoon. I'm Don Renchi, the coordinator for the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Services Pesticide Safety Education Program, formerly known as our Agricultural Chemicals Unit. Today we're called the Ag and Environmental Safety Unit. There's a Don Renchi in all 50 states in this country. Under the land grant system, which we'll talk a little bit more about as I get ready to summarize this presentation at the end of the day. But part of what we're trying to do now is to help all of our applicators, all 65,000 of you guys in the state of Texas, come into compliance with any numbers of sets of federal and state regulations. Today, as I talk about these pocketbook issues and we find our way going through here, we're going to talk a little bit about the Texas auxin herbicide regulations and their impact and importance in Texas. We're going to talk about TDA and USDA and EPA record-keeping requirements. Also, we're going to talk about the 1992 Worker Protection Standards and the changes that have been made since 1996 and again in 2015. And more importantly, we're going to talk about the Federal Applicator Certification and Training Regulations, which has been around in Texas since the 70s, but they too were revised by EPA in 2015. So this afternoon, I want to be sure that working with my 250 teammates around the state, as we move forward, you guys have all the information necessary during 2020 to be successful and to stay out of jail. So let's get down and let's talk about strategies that we can use and consider to positively impact and mitigate any negative consequences or outcomes from these regulations. I'd certainly like to thank you all for taking time to allow our extension family to work with you all today as we prepare to give you a CEU related to laws and regulations to meet the criteria for the Texas Department of Agriculture. I'm going to spend some time today covering a few objectives that I have with you, and amongst the things that I want to do are to bring you information about Texas auxin herbicide regulations. Now, most of us are going to be farmers and ranchers, And many of you may be asking yourselves, well, how does that fit me? But because these technologies are being adopted by both cotton, soybean, as well as rancher customers across the state, we want to be sure we cover a few key points there. In addition, I'm going to talk to you all about some record-keeping requirements. As I get the critique back from the Department of Agriculture, often the concern that they have is that we aren't necessarily getting the right information recorded on our TDA records, as well as on our structural pest control records, to go along with the USDA record-keeping requirements. So I'm going to spend a few moments, and we'll cover some of those requirements as well. And in addition, we're going to talk about the Federal Worker Protection Standard, which is nothing new in Texas. It's been around, as a matter of fact, since 1992. We're going to talk about subtle revisions that EPA began implementing in 2015. We had talked about that then. Now we're going to talk about those final requirements. And lastly, we're going to spend some time on federal certification and training requirements, which really means to you, what do we do to get a license initially, and what do we have to do if we want to keep one? So with all those things being said, I also want to discuss some strategies that we may need to consider in an effort for us to positively impact and mitigate any negative consequences from these regulatory changes. Those of you all that know me well know that we're always going to talk about requirements for training and education. And so we're going to start off here with what appears to be row crops, but not really. Actually, what we want to do is talk about cotton, soybeans, and pasture. When I tie pasture in here, we want to remind you of some of the newer technologies that have been around for about 3 years now. When we look at the Enlist and the Ingenia, those are going to be dicamba 2,4-D formulations. And then we go a little further and we talk about the Loyant formulation. That's going to be a herbicide that is going to be similar in modality of action, but this one is for rice. They all control broadleaf weeds and specialty crops. We go a little further and we look here at what it says, synthetic auxin herbicides, sensitivity scale for dicamba. For those of us that are ranchers, we're very much concerned with the fact that in many instances, our neighbors who may be on a small homestead or something to that effect have moved in. They may have stone and palm fruit in their yard, peaches, pears, plums. They also may have vegetable gardens in their yards. As we're using the traditional 2,4-D formulations in dicamba in our brush control programs, you may not be aware that these new formulations that are specifically designed to work on cotton and soybeans, they are formulated in a manner, but they all control the same weed spectrums. What this means to you is if I tell you that I'm over here and I'm using either of those 2,4-D formulations, and near me I have broccoli, or I have cabbage or kale at 1/75 of 1 pint per acre, these crops demonstrate sensitivity. So what that really means to you then is that between 1/75 and 1/300 of a pint per acre, these crops, cantaloupe, cucumbers, peaches, peanuts, and squash, also demonstrate sensitivity. Even more important than that, you'll find cotton demonstrating sensitivity to dicamba at a very much higher rate, although we have cotton varieties that have been engineered to recognize certain formulations, traditional cotton, which has not been altered to recognize these molecules, obviously at 1/300 to 1/800 of the rate are very sensitive. And we look over here at grapes, and everyone in Texas now has one strain, which makes them a vineyardist. In that case, we're saying at 1/800 and less of the rate, these crops are extremely sensitive to those formulations. When I change slides and I talk about then not dicamba anymore, but rather now 2,4-D, we find pretty much the same as we go along all the spectrums. On the low end of this, greater than 1/75, mustard, peaches, peanuts, pecans, turnips. We come over on the moderates, cantaloupes, cucumbers, squash. We come over on the severe, peppers, tomatoes, and watermelons. And we get over on the extreme, the same crops we pretty much talked about a moment ago. What does that really mean to you as a rancher or as a conventional farmer? Our neighbors deserve our vigilance as we're out using these products to ensure that we don't harm them as we're out trying to produce the crops and make the monies that we need to support our families and our agricultural enterprises. I would also remind you that when we look at soybean sensitivity, this simply is a scale to indicate to those of us that may have been producing those crops that were non-modified, that if I'm using any of these products in their proximity, they also demonstrate high levels of sensitivity. We look at cotton, again, pretty much the same type of a scenario. And then lastly, when we move over and we start talking about other crops on dicamba symptomology, again, the cupping up is very, very reminiscent, and it's almost indicative of the type of damage that will do. And if we were talking about 2,4-D, it would have cupped down. Very quickly, the reason we're summarizing this is because most dicotyledonous plants are very sensitive to these synthetic auxin herbicides. I would remind you that extremely low rates, less than 1% of the full dose, can cause auxin-like symptomology. The problem with that is in row crop scenarios, cotton, beans, and these types of things, we may say, well, let's take it to yield. And if it's more than 10% difference in the yield, we have an issue. In crops like the stone and pome fruits, you may not have that option or that luxury. As a matter of fact, there may or may not be a residue tolerance. In an instance like that, you have just bought a crop because there are no end uses for those products if they don't have residue tolerances for them. So we want to mind ourselves to be good neighbors when we're out there and we're using these products. So follow the labels explicitly. Make certain that we're following good application techniques and strategies, and we're adhering to weather-wise application, meaning that if the conditions are not conducive for on-target deposition, find something else to do. I'd like to change gears now and talk a little bit about federal and state laws and regulations specifically relating to applicator record keeping. As I indicated to you, TDA has asked us to make certain that our extension family, working with our producer customers, remind those guys of the importance of keeping good records. When I was doing this in Iowa for American Cyanamid, and record keeping first came on as a part of using restricted use pesticides, the one thing I always told my growers, if I don't know what I've used, I don't know how well it performed. If I'm having issues with weed control, insect control, disease control, or whatever my production dilemma may be, it may be because I haven't been keeping up with what I've been doing and how well it's been working. In 1990 in the Farm Bill, USDA began requiring that states require users of restricted use pesticides also maintain records of their applications. As you can see, these are the data that USDA requires, which are less than the data and information that the Department of Agriculture in Texas requires, which in many instances are also less than the data or information depending on the crop scenario and the specific product that you're using that EPA may require. So, quickly it says that I want the applicator's name, their applicator license number, the month, the date, and the year, the registration number of the product, the active ingredient, the brand or the product or the trade name, the crops, commodities, and or the sites, the restricted entry interval, and or it talks about the size of the treated area to include what we call spot treatments, as well as the total amount applied, the field ID or location, and then the completed records had to have been maintained, as you can see here, for within 30 days you had to have gotten that done. You have to keep those for 2 years. And where we have restricted entry intervals that last beyond that, you want to make certain that you get the information also recorded. Now, we talk about the record keeping again. You have to keep those records regardless if it's a herbicide, a fungicide, an insecticide, a rodenticide. It could have been an avicide if you were out trying to deal with feral birds. In a scenario like that, all of those are pesticides. And let's make certain we're visiting with our in-town comrades and we're trying to educate them about country living, that we don't go out and confuse the fact that an insecticide is a pesticide rather than a pesticide is an insecticide. They're all inclusive when I use the word pesticide. Moving along, I'd like to also tell you that when we talk about the record-keeping requirements, they're required for each application, including spot treatments. The certified applicator has to keep that documentation for a period no longer than 2 years per application. And in Texas, you have to get it recorded within 30 days as a commercial applicator, within 14 days to comply with the state records or the federal record-keeping requirements. And again, they must be made available to the state pesticide control officials, in this case, TDA, or USDA or EPA upon request. USDA stopped funding this program in the early 2000s, yet the record-keeping requirements still exist because Texas has its own set of record-keeping requirements. So regardless if it's federal or state, the same data has to be kept. When it talks about federal and state laws require record-keeping for restricted use pesticides, and in Texas, including state limited use pesticides. In all 254 counties, there are 9 active ingredients, including 2,4-D and dicamba. Also to include sodium fluoroacetate, which we know as the livestock protection collar, as well as sodium cyanide, which we call the M44, all requiring record keeping in the state of Texas. And in 54 currently, of the 254 counties, there are 4 products, including dicamba, 2,4-D, bromacil, and propanil, that also, and quinclorac, that require record keeping. So those 4, not the bromacil. Moving down, it says business tools are useful for tracking inventories. All these things happen to be true. I would remind you, without complete records, it's difficult to portray the pesticide applicator as a competent individual. If you're challenged in court and or challenged by a neighbor and or by a regulatory agency, failure to have recorded that information as required by both federal and state law is no excuse for having gotten it done correctly. It's crucial to provide that information to compliance officers in an effort to make certain that we have no issue. I would remind you that USDA or EPA requirements depend on the type of certification that one has. In the case of private applicators, that would have been USDA. In the case of both private and certified, that would be USDA and EPA. Now, if you look at this slide, it shows you the states that have record-keeping requirements. Notice here that the states that have their own record-keeping requirements are all in blue. The states that do not have their own record-keeping requirements are all in white. The only information that you're required to keep there is what EPA says and what USDA says. The states in blue have additional record-keeping requirements for each of their states, going on and compounding what EPA may have said and what USDA may have required. The next slide also talks about those states under state pesticide record-keeping requirements. And then we move over, it says now the private applicator record-keeping requirements. They vary significantly from state to state. Records of all applications, not only restricted use pesticides as in the state of Texas. Additional record-keeping items such as wind speed, temperature, and direction in the state of Texas. Complete records have to be recorded within a specified period of time, and they have to be retained for a specified period of time. We look at the Texas Department of Agriculture's record-keeping form. Again, you can see it is more inclusive than was the one that we had for USDA. Here we had wind speed, temperature, direction. In addition to that, if it's an aerial application, we also wanted to know the FAA number of the plane or the unmanned aircraft if it had pesticides on those tanks if we were making those applications. Those are the data that it requires. Going a little further, you'll note down here it also talks about spot treatments in the state of Texas, as it also required for USDA. Lastly, I would like to remind you guys as it relates to the worker protection standard, there are again specific record-keeping requirements there, amongst which would be the employer of the pesticide or the handlers of the agricultural establishment, their name, whether you've been trained, whether the application has been made in the last 30 days on that agricultural establishment, and whether or not in Texas it has a box on our record form for having been trained annually, no longer 5 years since 2015, as is now required by EPA. Records for inspections by regulators and health professionals. The law allows that if there's an incident that occurs human exposure, I can go and I can have a medical practitioner or someone that could be called a designated representative under WPS come in and request this information of my application records so they know exactly what may or may not have happened as related to that pesticide application. When it talks about routine inspections from the Department of Agriculture, again, during their facility inspections, what they call that, or use observation, if they're out watching you make an application, they can request copies of your records of your applications for the past 2 years to see what you've been doing if you're in compliance with those record-keeping requirements. We've talked about medical purposes by those designated health care professionals. They too can get that information. And then lastly, I would remind you that records are accessed for compliance issues, whereas you may have a complaint filed against you because you out making an application in weather conditions that were not conducive for on-target deposition. As a result of that, you wound up with an issue or with a problem. The benefits obviously far outweigh the disadvantages of keeping good records. As a matter of fact, this list just demonstrates various benefits for professional applicators, amongst which is making good pest management decisions. Also, making pesticide management decisions that are the right pest management decisions. Your application efficacy, how well is it working? We started a conversation off with that. Liability protection. Well, did he do it this day or was it the day before? The time that you started the application, the time you completed the application, the date, the location, inventory control, as well as use data resources to ensure that what you're doing actually worked. Now, let's kind of summarize the record-keeping thing. That all ties back in, for example, with the first part of the discussion on were you applying 2,4-D in your pasture and your neighbor had some grapes. But if you didn't have your records recorded within a timely manner, how would you be able to defend yourself? So all these things are in a glove. And if you don't have the glove on your hand, you're in no position to protect yourself moving forward. Let's talk a little about the 2015 Worker Protection Standard. And I want to kind of go over that because there is nothing new under the sun in Texas. Those of you all that know me know the story well. Back in 1992, when we were working at the Department of Agriculture, EPA came down and they were gathering information and data on what states were doing relating to this proposed set of regulations. Well, as far back as 1989, the state of Texas already had a set of training requirements on the books for individuals that worked on agricultural establishments. The law said, under the Texas Housing Communication Standard, also known as the Texas Right to Know law, if I have a seasonal payroll of $15,000 and I use more than 55 gallons or 500 pounds of chemicals, those seasonal workers meet the criteria for me to be a threshold or a covered employer, meaning I had to train everyone. If my full-time employee wage base exceeded $55,000 and I use 55 gallons or 500 pounds, again, I was a covered employer. These training requirements recovered that every year I trained individuals on hazards associated with use of the pesticide. Well, wouldn't you know, in '92, EPA adopted many of the same principles and practices that we were using here in Texas. They call theirs the Federal Worker Protection Standard. We rolled around until about 1996. They revised that '92 standard to be more inclusive. Now it included things like golf courses, botanical gardens, things that it didn't previously include because traditionally it only covered, quote, real row agriculture. Well, wouldn't you know, back in 2015, they came back and they looked at the law. They said, well, there are some things rolling along with this, including the fact that previously you only had to train on it every 5 years. They proposed that the training be strengthened, meaning it had to be done every 5 years. Then they came in and they lowered the age at which an individual could go onto an agricultural establishment where restricted use pesticides or pesticides in general had been used. So we're going to talk about these key revisions to the WPS. Amongst it, you still have to inform your workers, as well as a handler. A worker is an individual who only makes contact with green plant material or soil residues that may have pesticides. A handler is an individual who may do both. They may make contact with green plant material or soil that has pesticide residues. In addition, they may also go out and mix, load, and apply pesticides, which is why in Texas, we would prefer and suggest you cover all of yours not as workers, rather as handlers. That way there is more benefit in the things they can do for you on your agricultural establishment. It now requires annual training. Previously, this training was done every 5 years for both workers and handlers. Now, there's no grace period. Previously, I had a period of time when they came up on my agricultural establishment before I had to train them. Now it's the first day they go to work. Now I have to display a sign and provide application information. Nothing new there. We're still having to do that. And this information can be requested by a worker or handler or a treating medical personnel or a designated representative, which we saw previously under USDA's record-keeping requirements. So not a lot of different things, just more clarification and harmonizing of all the laws. And it also says I have to post signs where my restricted entry intervals for outdoor application entry back into that area may be greater than 48 hours. Previously, most of you all in Texas, when we dealt with WPS, were familiar with the green and blue card. No longer colors to the cards. The cards now are what we call worker protection standard cards. There's a two-sided card here, which is why you see two different things going on. One side wants to know the date of the training. The employee has to sign it. The trainer has to sign it along with their number for the training materials that they use from our website that allows for EPA to sanction those trainings. In addition to that, they want to know the trainer's name. If the trainer and the employer are different, they want that information. They also want to make certain that you go over here and tell me, were you either, in our case, someone that was an EPA approved trainer, or were you a worker or a handler? And as we said over here, were you a state designated trainer such as Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, or were you an entity who had been trained using EPA train the trainer materials? Note here also, in the state of Texas, if you're under my supervision, either, and especially more importantly, to apply pesticides, I have to have this affidavit of supervision or this direct supervision affidavit. This has to be done annually. We want to know who's under my supervision, what products they've been trained on, the reg numbers for the products they've been trained on, what activity they've been trained on. Was it for pasture? Was it for corn? Was it for soybeans? Was it for stone and palm fruit? And then more specifically, it also wants to know the use that we're mandating they do it with. Down here, it wants to know the printed name of the licensed applicator. You're under my supervision. It also wants to know the signature as well as the person who's being supervised and the date that the training took place. When we go back and we talk about what the federal WPS requires, in addition to those state requirements, here's this central location sign. You're familiar with this since 1992. Now they want to make certain that you have a record of the application in proximity to what they call the central location where workers may gather at your agricultural establishment. This sign you're very familiar with. You can get it from our website. You can go to Gimpler's, or you can just give us a call at the office and we'll walk you through where you get it. The bottom line, this sign has to contain information on the nearest medical facility in your location, along with the contact number for the regulatory agency responsible for WPS enforcement in our state. In this case, that will be the Texas Department of Agriculture. Also, the law requires that these additional data be at that central location, that you have copies of the safety data sheets. Since 2009, these are no longer called material safety data sheets. Now they're referred to simply as safety data sheets. These accompany and or labeling when they are with the label. OSHA, not EPA, requires this training when I'm training under WPS. As a matter of fact, if I'm using any pesticide in Texas, be it agriculture or structural, OSHA requires that that employee be trained on the use and understanding of these safety data sheets. At the central location, you also have your National Fire Protection Association information associated with the hazards of the products that you may have stored at that facility. When we talk about a designated representative, what that means to you is someone that speaks the language of the person who has been trained either as a worker or as a handler on your establishment. The law also says, if I'm going to have you working on my agricultural establishment and you speak a language different from mine, I must have someone available to train you or to decipher or translate into the language that you speak. Failure to do so is a violation of the law. I would remind you that when we talk about workers, the law continues to say that I have to protect every worker or handler or other people from exposure to pesticides during applications on my agricultural establishment. If the label requires respirator protection for handler tasks, as an employer, I'm required by OSHA to ensure that I provide you with respirator training. As a matter of fact, it's getting more and more difficult now to find qualified health professionals who even understand anything about pesticide poisoning. So what we would like to remind you of is that because it is so challenging, make sure you understand that a respirator is anything with more than one strap that either says N, R, or P, 95, 99, or 100. Two straps, cartridges, N, 95, 99, R, P 95, 99, 100, as well as so N, R, and P. And the same thing. These are air purifying respiratory devices. This is an air supplying respiratory device, but they all only filter down to 0.3 microns in efficiency. They all require the same level of training. As a matter of fact, If I'm going to have any employee wear one of those, this 8-page form, this medical evaluation questionnaire has to be given to that employee. That employee fills it out. They give it back to me. I send it to a licensed healthcare practitioner who in turn reviews it, sends it back to me. Then we go about the business of implementing our training program, which has to include a record of the fit test training, respirator inspection checklist indicating I've shown them how to maintain that respirator, as well as a respirator program checklist indicating I've done all these things, including in that respirator program, that employee to use that respirator, including the 2-strap N95 particulate filter. So, if you find yourself having a pesticide that requires the use of a respirator, look for an alternative product that may not require the use of a respirator, or find an alternative delivery strategy. If it were for an indoor confined application, perhaps try and find an outdoor application that would not have required that being in enclosed space, so you didn't have to use that respirator. I would also remind you, when it says here under WPS, and they call it an application exclusion zone, in the state of Texas, we've always had application exclusion zones. What that really means to you is if an unlicensed, unauthorized individual comes into a field where we were making a pesticide application, we were supposed to cease and desist and actually ask them to exit that area. So what this really explains a little more plainly, if I'm on a ground-driven piece of equipment, tractor, irrigator, high clearance machine, and I've got a spray tank behind it, within 25 feet, wherever I have that piece of equipment in that field, no person can breach that zone. If I'm having an aerial application done within 100 feet, wherever I'm in that field, no person can breach that zone. It goes a little further when it talks about application exclusion zones. It also says or infers that if it's an early entry worker, someone that's going to go into an enclosed space, that individual has to be 18 years old. And if it required the use of a respirator before they went in there, I had to have had them in my respirator training program before I allowed them to enter that area. So, 18 years old, before you can go into an area under a restricted entry interval. Now, the law continues. It says now we've protected, we've informed, now we want to mitigate any exposures to pesticides. Well, in order to do that, the law since 1992 has required that within a certain distance, or wherever I have a worker or a handler making an application on an agricultural establishment, I also have water, potable water. In addition to the potable water, I also have a change of clothing, single-use towels, an eye wash station, as well as liquid soap. So what we've done here is, if you go to our website, Gimpler still has this decontamination kit. Now the law says, more specifically, if it's a worker, 1 gallon of potable water within a quarter mile. If it's a handler, 3 gallons of potable water within a quarter mile. We're going to go back here in Texas and say 5 gallons of water for everyone working on my agricultural establishment, along with one of these decontamination kits, is a great way to go. Because in Texas, we err on the side of caution. It talks about the liquid eye wash station, as well as the single-use towels and the change of clothing. Nothing's new under the sun in Texas. We're going to continue to do those things. When it talks about decontamination of the workers, we would remind you, after that individual is done, before they eat, drink, smoke, chew gum, chew tobacco, or use the toilet, we need to make certain that they've washed or decontaminated themselves thoroughly. If they have to drive the vehicle home, we would strongly suggest, recommend, or ask, again, they decontaminate themselves before they crawl up in the cab of that vehicle and transfer those residues in a manner where it could hurt themselves or their families. Well, you may ask, what are the changes that have the greatest impact? I would always say training the next generation. EPA says that before I can allow anyone to go into an area that is not my immediate family, treated with a pesticide, that individual has to be 18 years old. The question we Texans often ask, if I'm going to train a young man or a young woman, I can't wait until they're 18. I really need to start when they're malleable. The younger, the better. That's how you build heritage, tradition, and an appreciation for the culture that we have here in the state of Texas. So, with that being said, I would have to wait before I taught my nephew, my niece, my grandson, or my neighbor's kid how to drive this piece of machinery until they were 18 years old. I would have to wait until that kid was 18 years old before I could engage them in agricultural enterprise, such as 25 cents a bale to load these 4 high and put them in the barn. Thank God EPA did make some allowances. And when I say that, what we mean is that they went in and they said, now there are some immediate family exemptions. So, more specifically, these exemptions apply. They do not require the minimum age for early entry workers. They also do not require the minimum age for early entry handlers as long as they are immediate family. We're going to qualify that. They don't have to engage in training, but we're going to train regardless. They don't have to have cleaning and storing and maintaining, but we're going to do it anyway. We're going to notify them of applications. We're going to have the central posting, and we're also going to have the decontamination. We're going to talk about emergency assistance, because that's just the way we do things in Texas. When we talk about what those other exemptions are, it says now they have to comply with the following: whether they're immediate family or not, wear the clothing, keep out of the treated areas, assure that the pesticides don't contact any persons, ensure that all persons are out of the treated areas and the application exclusion zones during those applications, and handlers get the medical evaluations, get fit tested and training if they're going to use respirators. Now, immediate family now includes, as you can see, spouses, parents, step-parents, foster parents, fathers-in-law, mothers-in-law. They now include sons-in-law, daughters-in-law, grandparents, grandchildren. So a whole list of folks that previously were precluded from being considered as your immediate family. With that being said, let's summarize WPS. Actually, in Texas, there's nothing new under the sun, except if I'm going to wear a respirator, now I have to fill out a form. Previously, if I was going to wear a respirator, I still had to have a fit test and a fit check. Previously, since 1998, as a matter of fact, in Texas, under OSHA 10134, I've always had to ensure that I had a training program. It's just more clearly spelled out. The only new thing is that in Texas and the rest of the states, you have to be 18 to go into an area where a restricted entry interval is in effect. But, and more importantly, immediate family has those exemptions, and we can see immediate family is quite exhaustive as it relates to who is considered immediate family to go into those treated scenarios. Now, let's change gears for the last time, and let's talk a little bit about certification of pesticide applicators. This rule also was updated in 2015 by EPA. So there were 2 major pieces of legislation that EPA updated in 2015. And these changes became effective in 2017. Others still yet took effect in 2018. And here we are over in 2019, where the states are now having to do things. And in 2020, where the states are finalizing their plans, such as in Texas, having submitted our state plan on how we're going to certify, meaning license initially, and recertify, meaning relicense applicators after continuing education activities. And that's important we talk about that, because Texas, in that sense, is a great place to live. With that being said, we do a comparison here. What you find is that now, since 2015, effective 2018, EPA is attempting to enhance private applicator competency standards. They wanted to strengthen private applicator the competency gauge by actually having an exam. Well, in Texas, since the 1970s, and in particular since the 1980s, if you want to get a private applicator's license, you had to attend a Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service function that lasted a minimum of 3 hours. After that, TDA would, until 2014, come in and administer the exam. Since 2014, now, once you leave the county agent's office, and or since 2015, when you take it online as a private applicator training, you get a certificate. You send in your $100 licensing fee on forms prescribed by TDA. They notify you within 4 to 6 weeks of the location that's nearest you amongst 24 locations in the state of Texas that you can go and sit for your exam. So, in that sense, Texas is still a great place to live. We still require training. The difference now, TDA won't come after the activity and administer the exam, but at your leisure or at your convenience, you can go to that location, sit for the exam. In Texas, we've never allowed non-readers. If you couldn't read in Texas, then you couldn't get a license. because of the burdens associated with and the risks associated with the use of pesticides. You can be under supervision, but you couldn't have gotten a license. We also make certain that in Texas, since 2015, every individual that has a license in Texas, now their licenses have barcodes. As a matter of fact, under the previous administrations here within Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, we sent out more than 65,000 barcoded little recertification cards. The next year, the Department of Agriculture's licensing program found the wherewithal to ensure moving forward all their licenses, both agricultural and structural, to include vector, also have those barcodes on them. As a matter of fact, in addition to that, all 250 counties engaged in recertification received scanners along with a laptop, so that when you have someone come to one of your CEU programs, you simply take out your scanner, scan in their barcode on their license, it goes right into the database, and then you hit send, it goes straight over to the Department of Agriculture. So we want you applicators in the state of Texas to appreciate the fact that we appreciate the seriousness of our responsibilities to work on your behalf. I would remind you that in Texas, we have these special categories. And what that really means to you is that if I'm out doing predator control in the state of Texas, I am allowed to use the livestock protection collar to protect both my sheep and goats. I'm also allowed to use M44s to protect both my sheep and goats. Our biggest challenge is trying to get young men and young women trained to carry on these agricultural enterprises so that we can sustain Texas's agricultural enterprise base, those jobs that will be required to feed these Texans as we move forward. That's the greatest challenge that we face. When we look a little further, I would remind you that in Texas, whereas EPA since 2017 and 2018 said that all the exams have to be administered closed book, you've never been able to take an open book exam in the state of Texas. All of our exams have been closed book. I would remind you that it talks about competency for non-licensed applicators in Texas since 1989. If you were going to use a restricted use pesticide, or for that matter, a state limited use pesticide, or a regulated herbicide in those 54 counties, annually you had to have been trained on the product you were going to use. And again, including the safety data sheet. It says now establishes qualifications for trainers in the state of Texas since 1989, and more particularly since 1992, revised in 96 and updated in 15, only licensed applicators in Texas can train. If not, you have to go to an EPA trainer program. And it talks about establishing qualifications for certified applicators in Texas. Again, all exams are administered in English. While we may have the wherewithal to be bilingual, because EPA only does their examinations in English, in Texas, that's what you find. All of the exams and study materials are in English. I'd also like to go over and remind you that Texas is seriously a great place to live, because in some of our sister states, when your licenses expire, however the frequency may be, 3 years for privates, or as in the case of Texas, 5 years for privates, rather than having to go and sit for another exam, if you've gotten your continuing education units during that 5-year period as a private applicator, you simply submit your renewal application along with your renewal fee, and you wait for your license to arrive. If you're a commercial or non-commercial applicator, either agricultural or structural, including public health, annually, you simply submit your renewal fee and ensure that you've gotten all your CEUs. In the case of a private applicator, it's 15, 2 laws and regs, 2 IPM, 11 general subject matter area. Commercial applicators ag, either laws and regs, IPM, or safety. Structural, a minimum of 2 laws and regs, IPM, or safety, and 1 per category. So it's very simple to follow in the state of Texas. In Texas, we've had to modify our state plan only to clarify the fact that if you sold a restricted use pesticide, including state limited use pesticides such as 2,4-D, or in those 54 counties, regulated herbicides, you always had to keep a record as a dealer for 2 years. That's been on our books. Nothing new under the sun. Non-certified applicators that may be using or supervising use of restricted use pesticides, again, training has always been required. Program reporting and accountability, nothing new under the sun. While our sister states, many of which may not have had these requirements, in Texas, we've been doing it all along. We have both civil and criminal penalty authority under our state plan here in the state of Texas. And lastly, as it relates to reciprocity, if you're licensed in another state, you can simply send verification of your licensure in that other state. We will not send you a license. We will send you a notification. You have an opportunity to sit for your license at a PSI location that may be in your state, take our examination, then you can come and function in the great state of Texas. But we disallow an individual from waking up one morning and saying, well, I'm going to go over here to Texas and I'm going to start me a new business and I'm just going to start walking and start competing with other business owners. It doesn't work like that. You have to pass our competency standards, demonstrate responsibility in the state of Texas, including proof of financial responsibility such as insurance. On the ag side, a minimum of $200,000, $100,000 bodily, $100,000 property. On the structural side, an aggregate of $300,000, $100,000 bodily, $100,000 property. If you're a municipality, then obviously you also have to demonstrate proof of financial responsibility in the form of a surety bond, however your county or your state or city governmental entity demonstrates those responsibilities. To better facilitate all of you all that are going to be in participation, including our county agents and our customers, what I have here is a screenshot of the Agricultural and Environmental Safety website. As a matter of fact, when I bring this website up and we take it live, it takes you over, and as you can see, it scrolls and it talks about the resources that we have available for you. And everything that I visited with you guys about when we talked about this worker protection standard stuff, all that can be found right here on this website. And what it does is it actually talks about the kilograms, the work protection standard itself, publications, contact information, and all those kinds of things. And so let's just go here and say, for example, we wanted contact information. Again, it would pull up and give us the links and what have you to have gotten a hold of us as Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. Going back over here to the worker protection, I want to be certain that when we pull that link up, it takes us to what we're going to call the perk. And when you look here at the perk, what that basically says is this is the Pesticide Educational Resources Collaborative. This was put together by all 50 states programs with funds supported by EPA. It's hosted and facilitated by my colleague Casey Buell over at Oregon State University. Any information that you needed to have gone in and complied with the worker protection standard, including PowerPoints and anything that EPA requires, can all be ascertained by having gone into this website. So, if you wanted that information, we could have done that. Consequently, also, you would have found miscellaneous pesticide safety information, as we talked about, everything from complying with the Clean Water Act, all the way down to talking about pesticide resistance management, federal and state regulations, record-keeping forms, spills and leaks, and then again, safety education publications. We're trying to make certain that you as taxpayers and my colleagues as teammates don't have to look too hard to get the job done. So again, that URL is agrilife.org/AES. Although we had gone, as I said a moment ago, kind of fast, I just kind of want to be certain that as we summarize the importance of today's discussion, that we go back to those bullets. And we've talked about the oxen training. We've talked about USDA record keeping requirement. We've gone over WPS. And more importantly, we've talked about the great place that Texas is to live because of certification and training. Each of those truly is a pocketbook issue. If we as agricultural producers, and those of us as educators, and those of us working collaboratively with them, either as regulators or on the industry side, if we're not all communicating, then these issues can get out of control because people that make these rules in either Austin or in Washington may not truly have the information they need to help make good decisions on our behalf. So let's just be sure that we recognize them for what they are. And then I'd like you to ask yourself, what can we do? Well, number one, stay involved. Communicate these issues. Participate in any opportunity you as an individual can to become involved in your industry. Discuss the compliance ramifications with your customers. Be certain that they understand. If you say, well, look, EPA just sent out this proposed regulation. Can we go about the business of updating your knowledge base? Can you send them in some comments that you may have had so that they better recognize the challenges that they face as they promulgate these regulations and how they may or may not impact your business? Let's do that. Let's also make certain that you seek assistance when you need it to facilitate your business's compliance. You have 250 young men and young women in these counties. You have another faculty base of more than 70, almost 100 specialists scattered around this great state of Texas, including everyone from an agricultural economist to an agronomist. If you all have concerns or you don't understand, that's why we have a land grant system, because we want to make certain that each one of us that want to engage, we have what we need to get it done. Lastly, I'd like to tell you that if you were not aware of these regulations that we discussed today, please ask some questions. That's why we're here. Again, thank you so much for allowing us to work on your behalf, and we do enjoy working for you.
Before we conclude, we'd like to mention a field day that was conducted by Zach Peter from Alta Seeds. We'll be posting a video of that on Facebook or Twitter and possibly also on the Texas AgriScience website. So be on the lookout for that video from Zach Eater from Alta Seeds. With that, we'll go ahead and conclude.
And lastly, I want to thank Texas AgriScience for hosting this event and all our sponsors. Special thanks to our coworker Anil Cantu for carrying on this Zoom meeting that I think it went smooth. And I want y'all to know that y'all completed 3 hours of CEUs that I'll be sending off in the next couple of days. You got 1 hour in Lawson Rigs, 1 hour in general, and 1 hour in IPM. Be sure to print out that certificate once you get it and keep it in your records for future reference. And if y'all have any suggestions for future events, let us know. And good luck on y'all's crops, and God bless y'all. Thanks.
Thank you.